The Wi-Fi in this building was garbage. A spinning wheel of death. That's all my Saturday night amounted to. I propped my feet up on the cheap particle board desk, the faux wood laminate peeling at the corner. My phone felt heavy in my hand. 1 bar. Then 2. Then back to the spinning wheel. I let out a low groan. My dorm room, my supposed sanctuary, felt more like a cage designed by the lowest bidder. The cinder block walls seemed to sweat, and the air was thick with the smell of stale pizza and something vaguely like burnt plastic from the ancient mini fridge humming in the corner. "It's a new supplement Mom was talking about," I'd said into my phone an hour ago, pacing the 4 feet of available floor space. "Some kind of herbal tea. For sleep." My own voice echoed back at me from the hard surfaces. I could hear my mom on the other end, her voice tinny and distant. "You just need to relax, Chloe. You're always so wound up." Easy for her to say. She wasn't living on caffeine and anxiety, trying to pass freshman comp lit. I gave up on the video I was trying to load and started doom scrolling instead. My thumb moved in a numb, repetitive motion. Swipe, swipe, swipe. Post after post of people living lives that weren't this. Lives with good Wi-Fi. Then a pop-up ad filled the screen. A calm, green background. A delicate, steaming ceramic cup. And text in a soft, flowing font. "Can't sleep? Find your peace with serenity." I snorted, a sharp, humorless sound. I closed the ad with more force than necessary. "Fucking knew it," I muttered to the empty room. "The phone's listening. That's just creepy." It was the kind of creepy you just accept now. You bitch about it for a second, then you move on, because what are you going to do? Throw your $1,000 surveillance device in the trash? So I moved on. Swipe. Swipe. My screen flashed. A notification banner slid down from the top. A friend request on a social app I barely used. The profile picture was a default gray silhouette. The name was 2 simple words. The Watcher. Weird. Probably a bot or a scam account. I almost dismissed it, but a flicker of something, boredom, maybe, made me tap it. My finger hovered over the ignore button. But then I looked at the name again. The Watcher. It felt different from the usual spam names, the ones with a bunch of random numbers. This one felt intentional. I tapped on the profile. My already slow connection took a moment to load the page. It was blank. Almost. The account had been created 10 minutes ago. No friends. No bio. Just one post. My breath hitched. It was a picture. A crisp, high-quality photo of a box of herbal tea. Serenity. The exact same brand from the ad. The exact same box I'd seen on my mom's kitchen counter over FaceTime. Okay. That was a hell of a coincidence. I sat up straight, my bare feet hitting the cold linoleum floor. The spinning wheel in my gut started to turn. "What the hell?" I whispered. My eyes darted around my room. It was exactly as I'd left it. Messy bed, clothes in a pile on my desk chair, textbooks stacked against the wall. Nothing out of place. It had to be a prank. Someone in the dorm. Maybe one of Jake's asshole friends from down the hall. They probably overheard my call. The walls were paper thin. That had to be it. It was stupid, but it was the only thing that made sense. Still, an unpleasant knot tightened in my stomach. I clicked out of the profile, my thumb shaking slightly, and hit ignore on the request. My heart was beating a little too fast. Just a dumb prank. Get a grip, Chloe. I tossed the phone onto my bed and stood up, needing to walk it off. I went to the door, peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty, lit by the harsh, flickering fluorescent lights. Just the same stained carpet and the scuffed-up doors of a dozen other rooms. I saw nothing, heard nothing. I turned back to my room, feeling a little stupid. My phone screen lit up again. Another notification. A direct message. From the Watcher. How? I ignored the request. You can't message someone who ignored you. Unless they were never really asking. The message preview was short. It was one sentence. The tea isn't as good as the person who makes it, Chloe. My blood went ice cold. It knew my name. It wasn't a bot. It wasn't a random prank. Someone overheard my call, sure, But they shouldn't know my name was Chloe unless they knew me. And the message, it felt wrong. It wasn't aggressive. It was intimate. A shiver traced its way up my spine. I unlocked my phone, my fingers fumbling. The message was there, sitting in my inbox. I tried to type a reply. Who is this? My fingers were trembling so bad I kept hitting the wrong keys. Before I could send it, the Wi-Fi symbol at the top of my screen suddenly displayed a small exclamation point next to it. No internet connection. No, 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 I breathed. I furiously toggled the Wi-Fi off and on, nothing. The network name was there, dhall_guest, but it wouldn't connect. A sick feeling of dread washed over me. I scrambled for my laptop on the desk. Same thing. Connected, no internet. My hands were clammy. This wasn't a coincidence. The ad, the profile, the message with my name. And now this. It was a sequence, a deliberate set of actions. Fine. I'd use my data. I swiped down the menu on my phone. The signal bars were gone. In their place, it just said, no service. I stared at it. That was impossible. I always had at least 2 bars in my room. Always. I mashed the airplane mode button on and off. Nothing. The signal was gone. Completely. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic, trapped bird. I was cut off. No Wi-Fi. No cell service. In a concrete box on the 3rd floor. The only thing that seemed to be working was this one single chat window, an open line to whoever the hell this was. It felt like they had reached into my room, into my phone, and snipped every wire connecting me to the outside world, leaving only the one that led back to them. They were in control. That was the message. I paced the tiny floor, my bare feet making soft, slapping sounds on the linoleum. My breath was coming in short, sharp gasps. Think. I had to think. What do I do? Scream? Who would hear? The RA was 2 floors down. Run? Run where? Out into the empty hall? Then I heard it. Knock. 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 3 soft, polite taps on my door. I froze mid-step. Every muscle in my body locked up. My blood turned to slush in my veins. It couldn't be. It was just another student. Someone needing to borrow a book. Someone asking if I had any milk. It had to be. But the silence that followed was absolute. No shuffling feet. No, hello? No, Chloe, you in there? Just nothing. The hum of the mini-fridge seemed to have died. The flickering of the hallway light, usually an annoyance, now felt like a warning. My breathing stopped. I could hear the pulsing of blood in my ears, a frantic drumbeat. I was a statue in the middle of my own room. Waiting. For what? For the knob to turn? For the knocking to start again? Harder this time? Bata. But it didn't. There was just the waiting. The thick, heavy silence. It knew I was in here. It was playing with me. A cat outside a mouse hole. I had to see. I had to know. I crouched down, moving without making a sound. My knees cracked, the sound like a gunshot in the still air. I held my breath, listening. Nothing. I crawled the last few feet to the door, the cheap, rough carpet scratching my palms. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. Slowly, I lowered my head, tilting it until my eye was level with the tiny gap between the bottom of the door and the frame. A sliver of the hallway was visible, the ugly, stained carpet. And a shadow. It was the shape of 2 feet, standing perfectly still, the dark outlines of worn-out sneakers. They weren't moving, not rocking back and forth, not shifting weight, just planted there, right outside my door, waiting, an endless, patient, terrifying vigil. How long had they been there? Did they know I was looking right at them? The thought sent a jolt of pure terror through me. I wanted to scream, to scramble backwards, but I was paralyzed, my eye glued to that sliver of darkness. Then the shadow moved. It didn't lunge. It didn't kick. It simply took one smooth, deliberate step back. And then it was gone. The space under my door was just empty hallway again. A breath I didn't know I was holding escaped my lips in a ragged, silent sob. I scrambled back on my hands and knees, my back hitting the leg of my desk with a dull thud. It was over. They were gone. Whoever it was, they were gone. My body started to shake, a violent, uncontrollable tremor. My phone screen, dark on the bedspread, suddenly lit up the room. My gaze snapped to it. Another message. The light felt like an accusation. With a shaking hand, I reached over and grabbed it. The screen was blindingly bright. A new message from the watcher. It was the last one. The account would vanish a second later, but I'd read the words. I'd read them 1,000 times, and the second they were on my screen burned into my memory. You should lock your door next time. My eyes shot from the phone to my door, to the deadbolt, the small, silver thumb turn. It was horizontal, unlocked. My hand, the one not braced against the floor, flew to my mouth to stifle a scream that was already clawing its way up my throat. My eyes were fixed on the deadbolt. Horizontal, unlocked. The single damning proof that my terror was real, that it wasn't a dream, that it wasn't a prank. The message on the phone vanished. The account was gone, as if it had never existed. But the words were seared onto the inside of my eyelids. You should lock your door next time. Air. I needed air. But my lungs refused to work. They were two shriveled bags, useless. A low, guttural sound escaped me, half whimper, half sob. I scuttled backward on my hands and heels, the linoleum cold and slick against my skin, until my back slammed into the solid frame of my bed. My head whipped around, scanning the shadows in the corners of my own room. The closet door was ajar. The space under my desk was a black void. It was in here. It had been in here. Or was it still? Verson Mach. The thought was a physical blow. I scrambled onto my bed, pulling my knees to my chest, making myself as small as possible. The phone was still clutched in my hand, a useless brick. No service. No Wi-Fi. I was in a box and something was rattling the lid. I don't know how long I sat there, a statue of pure fear, my ears straining for any sound, any creak of a floorboard or whisper of breath that wasn't my own. Every familiar noise was a threat. The hum of the mini-fridge was the growl of a predator. The rattle of the window pane in its frame was the sound of fingers trying to get in. Sleep didn't come. It couldn't. How can you sleep when you know the monster checked your lock and found it open? The first gray light of dawn was a mercy. It crept under the door and through the blinds, painting pathetic, weak stripes across the floor. It didn't make me feel safe. It just made the shadows I'd been staring at all night look pathetic and ordinary. I didn't move until I heard the first sounds of the dorm waking up. A door slamming down the hall, the distant flush of a toilet, the muffled thump of someone's bass. The world was coming back online, and with it, a fragile, paper-thin layer of normalcy. My door swung open without a knock. Maya stood there, a towel slung over her shoulder, her hair a mess. Dude, you look like death. Rough night? The dam broke. The words came out in a torrent, a jumbled mess of whispers and frantic gestures. The phone, Maya, the Wi-Fi, the message, my name. And then the knock. Oh God, the knock. And the feet under the door. And the lock, Maya. The door was unlocked. She just stared at me, her easygoing smile fading. She came in, letting the door click shut behind her. She sat on the edge of my bed, her expression shifting from confusion to genuine concern. She put a hand on my trembling arm. Whoa, slow down, Chloe. What are you talking about? A message? I told her everything. From the stupid T-ad to the final, soul-crushing text. Her eyes got wider with every word. She wasn't dismissing it. She believed me. Jesus Christ, she breathed when I was done, her voice low. That's not a prank. That's some serious psycho shit. She ran a hand through her messy hair, her brow furrowed. She looked around the room, as if seeing it for the first time as a crime scene. You have to tell the RA. You have to tell campus police. And say what? My voice was raw. That a spooky ghost account sent me a message and then disappeared? That I think someone stood outside my door? They'll think I'm crazy. It's better than doing nothing. She was quiet for a moment, thinking. Her eyes went distant. Then they snapped back to me. alight with a sudden ugly thought. Wait a minute. What? Alex, she said, the name dropping like a stone in the quiet room. What about Alex? I flinched. What about him? Think about it, she said, leaning in. He was always so weird about stuff. The way he'd just show up places you were, the way he obsessed over you. This sounds exactly like his brand of creepy, manipulative bullshit. I swear I saw someone who looked like him hanging around the main gate yesterday evening. No, I said, shaking my head, a little too fast. No way, we ended things. It was clean. He wouldn't. Wouldn't he? Maya pressed. Chloe, he cried when you broke up with him. He said you were his. Remember? This is him trying to scare you, trying to get back in your head. The idea was repulsive, but it was also logical. It was an explanation. It was a face I could put on the formless terror of the night before. An obsessive ex was a nightmare, but it was a nightmare I could understand. It was better than the alternative. Better than a faceless, nameless watcher who could kill my internet with a thought. He wouldn't, I repeated, but my voice had no conviction. The seed was planted. And in the barren, terrified landscape of my mind, it took root instantly. I had to get out of the room. I grabbed my shower stuff, needing the scalding water to burn the feeling of last night off my skin. The communal bathroom on our floor was a steam-filled pit, smelling of cheap shampoo and mildew. 3 of the 5 shower stalls were occupied. I took the one at the far end, my back to the wall, and let the hot water beat down on me. I felt a sliver of my sanity return. It was just Alex. Asshole Alex. I could deal with him. I would deal with him. When I stepped out, wrapped in a towel, the room was empty. The steam had condensed on every surface, dripping from the pipes and fogging the large mirror over the sinks. My heart was still beating too fast, a nervous rhythm against my ribs, but the anger was starting to push back against the fear. It was just him. It was just a stupid, pathetic game. I walked to the sink, ready to wipe a patch of the mirror clear to see my reflection. But I didn't have to. Someone had already cleared a space. In the center of the large, fogged-over mirror, traced with a deliberate finger, was a single, 4-letter word. Alex. My breath caught in my throat. No way, I whispered to the empty room. It was right there, clear and perfect. He must have been in here. Just minutes ago. While I was in the shower. He knew my routine. He knew I'd be in here. A new kind of violation washed over me. This was different from the nameless dread of last night. This was personal. This was invasive. My anger flared, hot and sharp. With the side of my hand, I furiously smeared the name away, leaving a wet, ugly streak on the glass. This had to stop. I spent the next few hours trying to force myself back into a routine. I went to the campus library. It was supposed to be a neutral zone, a safe space. Rows of books, the quiet whispers of students, the click-clack of keyboards. Anonymity. I found a carrel in the back, surrounded myself with textbooks, and tried to focus on an essay that was due Monday. The words on the page swam. My mind kept replaying the image of his name on the mirror. It was him. It had to be him. Maya was right. He was stalking me. Hacking my Wi-Fi was something he was definitely smart enough to do. He was trying to isolate me, to terrorize me until I came running back. The thought made my skin crawl. Hate, pure and simple, burned in my chest. I took a deep breath and forced my eyes back to my laptop screen. A half-written paragraph on postmodern literature stared back at me. I flexed my fingers, ready to type, to force this out of my head for just an hour. My cursor started to move on its own. I froze, my hands hovering over the keyboard. The little white arrows slid across my document, smooth and purposeful. It moved to the top of the screen, clicked on the File menu, and then Open. A window popped up, showing my Documents folder. What the hell? I whispered, my voice tight. I grabbed my mouse, trying to regain control, but the cursor fought me, jittery and resistant, before jerking away from my influence. It was like a digital tug-of-war that I was losing. The cursor clicked on a folder, one I hadn't opened in months. The folder's name was simple, Us. A cold dread, heavy and thick, spilled into my stomach. The folder opened. Thumbnails exploded across the screen. My face. His face. Us. At the beach, my head thrown back in a laugh. At a concert, his arms slung around my shoulder. In his car, me asleep against the passenger window. Dozens of them. A lifetime from 6 months ago. The cursor moved to the first image and double-clicked. The picture filled my screen. It was from our 1-year anniversary. We were at dinner, smiling at the camera, a candle flickering between us. Before I could process the violation, the screen flickered and the next picture appeared. And the next. A slideshow. A rapid-fire assault of memories I had tried to bury. My hands were shaking. I reached to close the laptop lid, to just make it stop. But then the music started. It came through my headphones, which were plugged in and sitting on the desk beside the laptop. It was our song. A stupid indie rock ballad we'd claimed on our 3rd date. The sound was tinny and distant in the silent library. But to me, it was a roar. He hacked my computer. Right now. In the middle of the library. He was watching me. He was in my files. He was controlling everything. This wasn't just a threat at my door anymore. It was everywhere. There was no safe place. My composure shattered. A strangled gasp escaped my lips. I slammed the laptop shut with a loud crack that made a girl a few carols down jump and stare at me. I didn't care. I shoved the dead laptop into my backpack, my movements clumsy and panicked. I could feel eyes on me. Was one of them his? Was he sitting somewhere in this vast, quiet room, watching me fall apart? Sa! I had to get out. I ran. I didn't walk. I ran out of the library, backpack slung over one shoulder, ignoring the shushing sound from the librarian at the front desk. I burst out into the afternoon sun, gulping in air that didn't make me feel any less suffocated. I ran back towards the dorm, the one place I knew he wouldn't physically be right now. The one place with a lock I could control. It was a stupid thought, but it was the only one I had. I slammed my dorm room door behind me, ramming the deadbolt home with the palm of my hand. The sound was final. I was panting, my back pressed against the wood, my bag sliding to the floor. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. That was it. I was done being scared. I was going to end this. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ripped it out, expecting another message from a ghost account. But it was a call. A real call, with a name and a picture I knew all too well. Alex. The timing was too perfect. It was a taunt. A final twist of the knife. I jabbed the green answer icon with my thumb. "What do you want?" I screamed into the phone, my voice breaking. "What the hell do you want from me? Leave me alone! Just fucking leave me alone!" The line was quiet. Not dead air. There was a faint sound, like someone breathing on the other end. Just listening. "Stop it!" I shrieked, tears of rage and fear blurring my vision. "I swear to God, Alex, I will go to the police. I will get a restraining order. This is over." Another beat of silence. Then his voice finally came through, and it wasn't smug or triumphant. It was just confused. "Chloe? What? What are you talking about?" "I was just calling to see if I could borrow your comp-lit textbook." Before I could even process his words, before I could form a response, the call ended. My screen went black for a second, then lit up with a white box. Call failed. My hand dropped to my side, the phone hanging loosely from my fingers. His voice, he had sounded so genuinely clueless, so completely baffled. Could he be that good an actor? Could he fake that level of surprise after tormenting me for 24 hours? Doubt, cold and sharp, pierced through my anger. Then my phone vibrated again. A single, sharp buzz. My eyes snapped down to the screen. A new text message from an unknown number. Just a string of digits. I opened it, my blood turned to ice. It was one short sentence. "You were too hard on him." The phone slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the cheap laminate floor. My mind reeled, trying to connect two impossible things. The sound of Alex's genuinely baffled voice and the cold, cruel text from the unknown number. My throat was tight. The anger that had been a roaring fire just moments ago was gone, replaced by a confusion so deep it felt like drowning. If it wasn't him, then who? Who was playing this game? Who was pulling the strings? My knees felt weak. I slid down the door, my back scraping against the wood, until I was sitting on the floor. I needed to control something, anything. My eyes scanned the room. It was a disaster zone. Clothes on the floor, textbooks askew, an empty cup on my desk. A physical representation of my mental state. Control. I needed control. I got to my feet, the motion robotic. "I'm cleaning," I said out loud. The words sounded foreign in the quiet room. Maya looked up from her bed. She had a small block of wood in one hand and a carving knife in the other. A small pile of pale shavings collected on the textbook she was using as a lap desk. Her brow was furrowed in concentration. "You okay, Chloe?" "Fine," I bit out, the word sharp and brittle. I couldn't tell her. Not yet. The doubt about Alex was a fragile, tiny thing. Saying it out loud might break it, and then I'd be left with nothing but the formless terror again. I started grabbing clothes, shoving them into the hamper. The simple, mindless action was a balm. 1 dirty shirt. 2. A pair of jeans. I was fixing something. My focus narrowed to the task. I worked my way across the small room, a frantic storm of tidying. I got down on my hands and knees to get the socks that had kicked their way under my bed. My fingers brushed against something hard and small. Not a sock. I pulled it out. It was a piece of wood, about the size of my thumb. It was smooth, dark, and intricately carved with symbols I didn't recognize. They weren't letters. They were sharp, intersecting lines, almost like tiny, geometric insects. "What's this?" I asked, holding it up. "Yours?" Maya's head snapped up. Her eyes fixed on the object in my hand. For a split second, her face was completely blank, and then she jolted, as if startled. She scrambled off her bed, almost dropping her knife. "Oh, yeah, that's—" She snatched it from my fingers, her touch surprisingly forceful. "That's mine. Must have fallen." She turned away, her back to me. "It's a good luck charm, from my grandma." She opened a small wooden box on her nightstand and dropped the carving inside, shutting the lid with a soft click. Her movements were just a little too fast, a little too jerky. But my mind was a swarm of hornets. I was too busy wrestling with the ghost in my phone to properly register the tremor in my friend's hands. I just grunted and went back to cleaning. That night, sleep was a distant country I had no visa for. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the words on my phone. "You were too hard on him." A sick, twisting feeling in my gut told me that the message wasn't a defense of Alex. It was a complaint, a critique of my performance in their little show. The dorm was quiet. The hum of the hallway lights, the distant thrum of the building's heating system. I lay perfectly still, my eyes wide open in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Then I heard it. A small sound from across the room. A soft, rhythmic click. Click, click. The sound of wood on wood. My breath hitched. I didn't move a muscle. I turned my head just enough to see Maya's bed. She was sitting up, her back to me. The only light came from the sliver under our door and the faint orange glow of the campus streetlights outside. In the dimness, I could see her on the floor, hunched over. Her hands were moving, arranging small, dark objects. They were just like the one I'd found. A dozen of them. Maybe more. Click, click. She was placing them carefully. Methodically. In a precise circle on the floor between our beds. My blood ran cold. What the hell is she doing? The question screamed in my head. This wasn't a good luck charm. This was something else. This was a ritual. My fear, which had been a wild animal clawing at the door, was now inside the room with me. It had a name. It had a face. And it was sleeping 10 feet away. I squeezed my eyes shut, feigning sleep, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure she could hear it. I must have drifted into a state that wasn't quite sleep, a gray space of pure anxiety. I was pulled out of it by a change in the air. It was cold. A deep, wet cold, like a cellar. I opened my eyes. A shiver racked my body. The window was shut tight, I knew it was. but a draft, icy and sharp, slithered across the floor and wrapped around my bare ankles. I pulled my feet up under the blanket. My desk lamp, which I always left on, flickered. Once. Twice. It died. The room plunged into a darkness so complete it felt solid. The only light was a weak, watery gray from the window. My breath came in ragged bursts. The cold deepened. It wasn't just a lack of heat. It felt like a presence. A weight. "Maya?" I whispered, my voice a dry rasp. "Maya, you awake?" Silence. Not just quiet. A thick, heavy silence that swallowed my words. The usual night sounds of the dorm were gone. The hum of the lights, the heating system, the distant traffic. All of it erased. It was like the world outside our room had ceased to exist. "Maya?" I said again, louder this time. My voice trembled. No answer. Panic set in, sharp and hot. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. My fingers fumbled against the cold glass. I grabbed it, my thumb hitting the power button. Nothing. The screen stayed black. It was dead. Not just out of battery. It felt like a cold, smooth stone in my hand. Then I heard the whisper. It wasn't a word. It was a sound, a sibilant hiss, right next to my ear. So close I felt the phantom touch of breath on my skin. I flinched so hard I hit my head against the wall. I scrambled to the far corner of my bed, pressing myself into the junction of the two walls, pulling my comforter up to my chin. My eyes darted to Maya's bed. It was just a lumpen shape in the gloom. But her shadow, the shadow she cast on the wall from the meager window light, it was moving. It wasn't the shadow of a person sitting up or lying down. It was elongating, stretching upward toward the ceiling like black smoke. The head tilted at an angle a human neck could never manage. The arms thinned out, twisting like licorice, the fingers becoming long, needle-like points. It bent and folded in on itself, a spider made of darkness. A scream was caught in my throat, a knot of pure terror. I couldn't make a sound. I did the only thing my animal brain could think of. I dove under the comforter, pulling it over my head, curling into a tight ball. My little fortress of fabric. It was pitch black, hot, and smelled of my own fear. I clamped my hands over my ears, trying to block out the impossible silence of the room. I could hear my own blood roaring in my ears. I could feel my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. My hiding spot. My last defense. Then I heard the footsteps. Soft, barely there. The creak of a floorboard right next to my bed. It was slow, deliberate, walking a circuit around me. I held my breath, praying, bargaining with a God I hadn't spoken to in years. Please, please, please. The footsteps stopped, right beside my head. The silence returned, stretched taut like a wire. I waited. Seconds felt like hours. Nothing. Maybe it was gone. Maybe a sound. The sound of a fingernail. Dragging. Scrape. It was on the comforter. A slow, deliberate line being drawn in the fabric right over my face. So close I could feel the microscopic vibration through the layers of cloth. I could almost feel the pressure of the pointed tip. It was tracing the outline of my skull. Another scream died in my throat, choked off by a sob. My body was rigid, a statue of pure, unadulterated fear. Tap. 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 It knocked on my head through the blanket, a playful, questioning little rhythm. The lights snapped on. The sudden, brutal yellow glare cut through the comforter. I gasped, blinded. The room was filled with light, with noise, with normalcy. Chloe? What the hell? Are you okay? It was Maya's voice, full of sleep and genuine concern. I ripped the comforter off my face, my eyes blinking wildly. Maya was standing by the door, her hand on the light switch. Her hair was a mess, her old band t-shirt was wrinkled. She looked exactly like she always did when woken up suddenly. The room was just a room. The shadow on the wall was gone. The cold was gone. The silence was broken by the familiar hum of the mini-fridge. You were screaming, she said, taking a hesitant step toward me. Or, like, making these awful choking sounds? Was it a nightmare? My eyes darted around the room. The circle of wooden things was gone from the floor. The wooden box on her nightstand was closed. My phone was on my nightstand exactly where I'd left it. It was all normal. Too normal. I started, but my voice failed. Was she that good? Could she have reset the entire scene in the split second it took for the lights to come on? "Chloe, you're white as a sheet," she said, her voice soft with worry. She came and sat on the edge of my bed. "Talk to me. Was it about that Alex thing again?" I shook my head, unable to form words. It wasn't a nightmare. It wasn't. The scrape. The sound was too real. The feeling of that thing tracing my face. I looked down at my hands, which were clenched into fists in my lap. I slowly uncurled the fingers of my right hand, and I saw it. Running from the knuckle of my index finger down to my wrist was a thin, angry red line. It was perfectly straight, welted slightly, with a tiny bead of blood where it began. A scratch. A long, precise scratch. Exactly where the sound had been. Right where the nail had dragged across my hiding place. The red line on my hand was a map of a place I'd never been. It burned, a thin, raised welt marking the path of a touch that couldn't have happened. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a nightmare. Nightmares fade with the morning light. This was a receipt. Proof of a transaction I didn't remember making. My heart was a frantic bird trapped in my ribs. I sat on the edge of my bed, the thin dorm mattress groaning under my weight. Across the room, Maya was getting ready for her 9 a.m. class, humming a pop song, completely oblivious. She moved with an easy grace that made my skin crawl. Every normal action, brushing her hair, grabbing a textbook, zipping her bag, felt like a performance, a lie. "You're sure you're okay?" she asked, turning to me. Her face was a mask of genuine concern. "You look awful." I couldn't speak. I just shook my head. The words were stuck somewhere behind my teeth. "I saw your shadow become a monster. Something scratched me through my blanket. Your good luck charms are some kind of goddamn voodoo shit." How could I say any of that without sounding insane? I watched her leave. The click of the door closing was a gunshot in the quiet room. I was alone, but I didn't feel safe. The room itself felt wrong, violated. My hand throbbed. I needed to do something rational. I couldn't sit here and let the paranoia eat me alive. I pulled on a pair of jeans and a sweatshirt. Decision made. I was going to report it. All of it. The texts, the feeling of being watched, the thing last night. Even if they thought I was crazy, I had to try. The resident security office was in the basement. A sad, windowless room that smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. The guard on duty was an old guy named Frank, with a gut that strained the buttons of his uniform and a face that looked permanently tired. I told him everything. I tried to keep my voice steady, laying it all out like facts in a police report. The unknown number. The messages. The escalating fear. I left out the shadow monster and the wooden carvings. I focused on the tangible. The harassment. The feeling of being unsafe in my own room. Frank listened, or pretended to. He steepled his fingers, nodding slowly. When I finished, the silence stretched. "Look, kid," he said, his voice a low rumble. "This is a college dorm. Pranks happen. It's probably some kid from down the hall with a crush on you, thinks he's being funny." "This isn't funny," I said, my voice rising. "Someone is messing with me." "Last night, you had a nightmare," he finished for me, his tone condescending. "You said it yourself. You were half asleep. You probably scratched yourself. Happens all the time." He waved a dismissive hand. "Block the number. If it happens again, we'll talk. But we can't file a report over a bad dream and some prank texts." I stared at him. The sheer wall of his indifference was more frightening than any shadow. I was on my own. No one was coming to help. The realization landed like a block of ice in my stomach. "Fine," I said, the word clipped. I stood up and walked out, his lazy, "Have a good one," following me down the hall. The walk back to my room was a blur of anger and frustration. He didn't believe me. Why would he? It sounded crazy. Maybe it was. Maybe I was losing my mind. I got to my floor, the hallway empty and quiet now that morning classes had started. I fumbled for my key, my hands shaking. As I went to put the key in the lock, I saw it. On the worn linoleum tile right in front of our door. A small smudge of dark, wet mud. It wasn't big, just a partial smear, like the edge of a shoe had brushed against the floor. My brow furrowed. It hadn't rained in 3 days. The campus grounds were dry. God! Someone's an idiot, I muttered, annoyed. Probably some guy from the soccer team not bothering to wipe his cleats. I unlocked the door, stepped over the smudge, and made a mental note to clean it up later. I had bigger things to worry about. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Then I froze. The air was still. Nothing looked out of place. My bed was still unmade. My desk was a mess of books. But right in the middle of the room, on the cheap, pale gray carpet, was a footprint. It wasn't a smudge. It was a whole, complete, perfect footprint. It was huge. A man's boot, size 11 or 12 at least. The treads were deep and clear, caked with the same dark, wet mud as the smear outside. It glistened under the overhead light. It wasn't there when I left 20 minutes ago. The door had been locked. I knew I had locked it. I always did. It got in. The thought was a physical blow. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth. My back hit the door, and the impact shuddered through my whole body. It was in my room. While I was gone. The security of the locked door was an illusion. My eyes darted around the room. I checked my laptop on the desk. Still there. My wallet was in my bag, untouched. I frantically opened my closet, my drawers. Nothing was missing. Nothing was even disturbed. Except for the footprint. A single, muddy declaration. I can get in whenever I want. I can stand in your space. This room isn't yours anymore. It's mine. Panic began to bubble in my chest, hot and sharp. I needed to call someone. I needed to tell someone this wasn't a prank. This was real. My fingers, clumsy and trembling, pulled my phone from my pocket. I dialed Maya. She was my roommate. She had a right to know. She had to believe me now. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Hey, what's up? Her voice was normal. A little distant, the way it is when you're trying to talk and do something else at the same time. I could hear a faint, muffled shuffling in the background. Maya, where are you? I whispered, my eyes still fixed on the footprint. The library. Like I said, I'm in the quiet study area on the 3rd floor. Why? You sound weird. Listen to me, I said, my voice cracking. Someone was in our room. They got in. The door was locked, but they got in. There's a muddy footprint in the middle of the floor. There was a pause. What? Chloe, are you serious? That's impossible. I'm looking right at it, Maya. It's real. I'm not crazy. Okay, calm down, she said, her voice still laced with that frustrating, placating tone. I'm sure there's an explanation. And then I heard it. It was faint, so faint I almost missed it, buried under the sound of her own voice in my ear. A tinny, familiar melody. It was the ringtone from my phone. An old indie rock song I'd set years ago and never bothered to change. My blood turned to ice. My phone was in my hand. It was on silent. The screen was black. It wasn't ringing, but I could hear it, through her phone, coming from wherever she was. My own ringtone. My throat went dry. Maya, I said, my voice barely a hiss. What was that sound? What sound? I didn't hear anything. Just some kids being loud a few rows over. Look, I'm in the middle of studying for a midterm. It was a lie. It had to be a lie. My mind raced. How? How was that possible? Did he clone my phone? Was he with her? Was he standing right next to her in the library, playing my ringtone, and she didn't even know? Or was she part of it? Where? I said, the word a piece of gravel in my throat. Where exactly are you? The library. Chloe, I told you. Why are you acting like this? Now there was an edge of irritation in her voice. I have to go. I'll see you later. Before I could say another word, she hung up. The line went dead. I stood in the crushing silence of the room, the phone still pressed to my ear. The world had just tilted on its axis. The threat wasn't just a footprint on the floor. It was everywhere. It could manipulate sound. It could be with my friend. It could be my friend. I couldn't trust anything. That's when I heard the new sound. Not from the phone. From the hallway. A small, metallic scrape. The unmistakable sound of a key sliding into the lock of my door. My breath caught in a strangled gasp. My survival instinct screamed. There was no time to think, no time to plan. I dove. I scrambled across the floor on my hands and knees and slid under my bed, pulling the overhanging comforter down to hide myself. My heart hammered against the floorboards. The space was tight, dusty, and smelled of old shoes. The key turned. The lock clicked open. The door swung inward with a soft creak. My world shrank to the narrow slice of view I had from under the bedskirt. All I could see was the floor, the door frame, and the footprint. A pair of shoes stepped into the frame, planting themselves right next to the muddy print they had made. They were big, athletic sneakers, caked in drying mud. He was back. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle the scream building in my lungs. My entire body was a single, rigid muscle of terror. I could hear my blood roaring in my ears. The shoes moved. A slow, deliberate tread. Not toward me. They walked past the bed, toward my closet. I heard the closet door slide open with a low rumble. I heard the sound of clothes hangers being pushed along the metal rod. A soft, rhythmic scrape. He was going through my things, looking for something. Or just looking, asserting his ownership of my life. I lay there, paralyzed, praying to a God I'd long since abandoned. Please don't find me. Please just leave. Please, please, please. The rustling stopped. The shoes turned. They took one step, then another. They were coming back toward the bed. They stopped right beside it, less than a foot from my face. I could see the frayed edge of a lace, the specks of dirt on the white rubber sole. I held my breath. My lungs burned. A drop of sweat rolled down my temple and into my eye, stinging. I didn't dare blink. I didn't dare breathe. This was it. He was going to kneel down. He was going to lift the comforter. He was going to see me. The shoes pivoted slightly. He was about to crouch. A sound so loud, so piercing, it felt like a physical assault. The dorm's fire alarm. A shrill, relentless shriek that vibrated through the floor, through my bones. From my hiding spot, I saw the muddy sneakers jump in surprise. There was a frantic curse, a man's voice, low and guttural. Then the shoes turned and bolted. They were out the door in a second. I heard them pounding down the hallway. The alarm kept screaming. A red light flashed from the detector on the ceiling, bathing my dusty hideout in pulses of crimson. He was gone. I lay there for a long moment, my body shaking uncontrollably. The alarm was a shield, a blanket of noise that made me feel safe. Finally, I managed to move. I crawled out from under the bed, my limbs weak and clumsy. I was covered in dust, my clothes damp with sweat. I stumbled to the open door and peered into the hallway. Doors were opening up and down the corridor, sleepy and confused students poking their heads out. The flashing red lights made the scene look like a nightclub in hell. And then I saw her. Down the hall, next to the red manual fire alarm box on the wall. It was Maya. She wasn't looking at the other students. She was looking directly at me. Her hand was still resting on the pole lever. Her expression wasn't one of panic or relief. It was something else, something I couldn't read. A cold, distant confusion. Her eyes bored into mine, and in them I saw an abyss of questions I was too terrified to ask. The shrieking stopped as suddenly as it had started, leaving a ringing in my ears. The hallway pulsed with red light. People were everywhere, a confused sea of pajamas and worried faces. My eyes were locked on Maya. She stood by the pole station, her hand falling away from the lever. She wasn't looking at the chaos, she was looking at me. Her expression wasn't scared. It was blank. Just blank, wide eyes staring through the flashing red light fixed on mine. Then, like a switch was flipped, she blinked. Her face crumpled into the appropriate mask of concern. "Chloe! Oh my God, are you okay?" I heard screaming, I thought, but I was already shaking my head, backing into my room. I slammed the door shut, locking it, my whole body trembling. The red light from the hallway strobed under the door. Her voice, muffled now, came through the wood. "Chloe? Let me in! What happened?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Her face in that moment was burned into my mind. That cold, unreadable look. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. The fire alarm fiasco finally got them to listen. The resident director, a tired-looking woman named Ms. Albright, and Frank, the useless security guard from before, stood in my room an hour later. The sun was up now, streaming through the window, making the muddy footprint on the carpet look even more obscene. It was a violation in broad daylight. "You're certain the door was locked?" Ms. Albright asked, her pen tapping against her notepad. "I'm positive," I said, my voice hoarse. "I lock it every time I leave." I locked it when I went to Frank's office. Frank grunted, avoiding my eyes. He was embarrassed. Good. He should be. "And your roommate, Maya, pulled the alarm?" I hesitated. My mind replayed the image. Her hand on the lever. Her blank stare. "Yes," I said. "She said she heard me scream." Ms. Albright sighed. "Okay. We'll check the hallway security cameras. The footage is motion activated. If someone who doesn't live on this floor came or went, we'll see it." It felt like a small victory. A tiny one. Finally, someone was doing something. They left, promising to be in touch. Maya came back a few minutes later, full of apologies and concern. She said she'd been on her way back from the library, heard a noise from our room, and panicked when I didn't answer her calls. I just nodded, not meeting her eyes. I didn't know what to believe. I didn't know what to feel. The world was a question mark. I spent the next few hours in a daze, sitting on my bed, staring at the floor. My phone buzzed. It was Ms. Albright. She wanted me to come to her office. Her office was sterile and smelled like air freshener. She had the security footage pulled up on her monitor. "Okay, look at this," she said, her voice all business. She hit play. The video was grainy, black and white. It showed the hallway. It showed me leaving my room. The timestamp matched when I went to see Frank. Then, 5 minutes later, a figure appeared. A man. He wore a dark hoodie pulled low and baggy jeans. His face was hidden in shadow. He walked right up to my door, paused for a second, and then the door just opened. He slipped inside. My breath hitched. I watched him enter my room. My space. Ms. Albright fast-forwarded. Then the figure burst back out of the room, just as the flashing alarm light started. He ran down the hall, away from the camera. As he turned the corner, he glanced back for a second. The camera didn't catch his face, but it caught his build. Tall, a little lanky, the way he moved. "Oh, God," I whispered. "You know him?" Ms. Albright asked, her voice soft. I couldn't speak. I just pointed at the screen. The shape of him. The swagger in his panicked run. It was familiar. It was nauseatingly familiar. Mark, my ex-boyfriend. A wave of something hit me. It wasn't just fear. It was a cold wash of rage, and under it, something else. Relief. It was him. A real person. Not a demon. Not a ghost. Just a pathetic, obsessed asshole I used to date. The world snapped back into focus. The monster had a name. They brought him in that afternoon. I wasn't there, but Ms. Albright called me right after. Her voice was different. Confused. "Chloe, there's a problem," she said. "What kind of problem?" "Mark has an alibi. A solid one." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" "The video. He was in his political science midterm during the entire time frame of the incident, from 9 a.m. to 10:30. His professor confirms it. 34 other students confirm it. He never left the lecture hall." I sank onto my bed. "That's impossible. I saw him." "You saw a figure with a similar build, Chloe. And, well, we spoke to him. He's adamant he wasn't here. He seemed genuinely terrified that he was being accused of this." Ms. Albright paused. He thinks you're trying to get him kicked out of school. The phone felt slick in my hand. He was lying. He had to be. How could he have an alibi? Did he pay someone off? The entire class? No, that was crazy. But the video, the way he moved. My brief moment of clarity shattered. The pieces scattered. The monster had a name, and now it had a lie. Or I was wrong. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe my brain was so desperate for an answer that it filled in the blanks with the most likely suspect. The paranoia came roaring back, stronger than before. Who was I supposed to believe? The video? Or a room full of 35 people? Huck! I skipped my afternoon classes. I couldn't face anyone. I told Maya I had a migraine and locked myself in the room while she went to the dining hall. I needed to think. I sat at my desk, my laptop open. I was supposed to be writing a paper on The Great Gatsby. Instead, I just stared at the blank screen. My reflection stared back, pale and hollow-eyed. Then, the screen flickered. The cursor, which had been blinking on the blank Word document, vanished. A new window opened on its own. A video player. My blood turned to ice. My hand hovered over the trackpad, but I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. It started to play. It was the security footage from the hallway. The same grainy black and white video Ms. Albright had shown me. There was the figure in the hoodie, walking toward my door. But this version was different. It was edited. As the figure approached the door, the video slowed down. It zoomed in on his face, which was still deep in the shadow of the hood. The video froze. For a split second, the image distorted, pixels shifting like sand. The shadows seemed to melt away. For just a heartbeat, the face underneath the hood became clear. Artificially, impossibly clear. It was Mark, his familiar smirk, the small scar above his eyebrow. It was unmistakably him. Then the image dissolved back into shadow. The video played at normal speed as he entered the room. It fast-forwarded, showing him running out as the alarm went off. The last frame, of him turning at the corner, froze. Black text appeared over the image. Simple, white, sans serif font. Don't believe him. I shot back from the desk, my chair crashing into the wall. My heart was a drum against my ribs. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't Mark. It was something else. Something that could hack campus security systems. Something that could manipulate video evidence. Something that was playing a game with me, using Mark as a pawn. It was trying to convince me, to push me in a certain direction. It was isolating me, turning me against the one person everyone would suspect. I was being herded like a sheep. My room, my own laptop, wasn't safe. I felt a presence in the air, a weight of being watched, not just from the hallway, but from inside my own technology. I slammed the laptop shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Who do I tell? Who would ever believe this? Hi, yes, a ghost hacked my computer to frame my ex-boyfriend. They'd send me straight to the psych ward. I couldn't trust Maya. Her blank face by the fire alarm, the way she conveniently showed up. I couldn't trust the security guards. I couldn't trust the evidence. I was completely, utterly alone. The walls of the dorm room felt like they were closing in, squeezing the air from my lungs. I had to get out. I had to get fresh air. My phone vibrated on the desk. My body seized. I stared at it, half expecting more text to appear on its dark screen. A text from an unknown number. But it wasn't. It was from Maya. My thumb trembled as I opened it. I believe you? I know you're not crazy. This Mark thing is a setup. I think I know how we can catch the real guy. Meet me behind the dorm. By the dumpsters. Come alone. My mind raced. A trap? Or a genuine offer of help? The text was everything I wanted to hear. Validation. An ally. Maybe her blank look was just shock. Maybe I was being unfair. I was so wound up, I was starting to suspect everyone. She was my roommate. She was in this too. If someone was getting into our room, she was in danger too. It made sense that she would want to stop it. Desperation clawed at me. I couldn't stay in this room. I couldn't do nothing. Doing nothing was letting it win. I texted back a single word. Okay. I grabbed my keys and slipped out of the room, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The sun was setting, casting long, distorted shadows across the campus green. The air was cool, but I was sweating. The area behind the dorm was deserted. It smelled of stale beer and garbage from the big green dumpsters. A single floodlight on the back of the building cast a sickly yellow glow over the cracked pavement. I could see a figure standing in the shadows by the farthest dumpster. Their back was to me. "Maya?" I called out, my voice thin. The figure stiffened. It turned around slowly. It wasn't Maya, it was Mark. His eyes were wide, his face pale in the yellow light. Confusion twisted his features. "Chloe?" he stammered, taking a step toward me. "What are you doing here?" "Maya just texted me. She said you were in trouble, that I needed to get back here right now." The world tilted. My blood ran cold. He held up his phone. I could see Maya's name on the screen. The same message. A setup. He was set up. I was set up. We were puppets, and the strings were being pulled. "No," I whispered, backing away. She texted me too, and at that exact moment it happened. FWOOM. A bank of powerful floodlights on the roof of the dorm flickered on, bathing us in a brilliant, merciless white glare. We were on a stage. I flinched, throwing a hand up to shield my eyes. High above, I heard a window slide open. Then another. I looked up. Silhouettes in the windows. Dozens of them. Faces peering down at us. Students. Pointing. Murmuring. I saw a girl I knew from my English class elbow her friend, gesturing down at us. I saw two guys from the floor above laughing. They weren't seeing two victims of a cruel prank. They were seeing the crazy girl and her crazy ex-boyfriend having a secret, dramatic meeting behind the dorm after she got him accused of breaking into her room. They were seeing a liar, a drama queen. The trap wasn't to hurt us physically. It was to destroy me, to discredit me, to make sure that no matter what I said next, no matter what happened to me, no one would ever believe me again. I stood there, pinned in the light, my face burning with a shame so total it eclipsed the fear. Up in the darkness, among the watching windows, I knew he was there, watching his masterpiece unfold. He hadn't just gotten into my room, he had gotten into my life. And he was tearing it apart. The public shaming was efficient, cold. Ms. Albright had us in her office before the last of the gawkers had even closed their windows. The air freshener still smelled the same. She didn't look at us, just at a form on her desk. Mark sat beside me, stiff and silent. The accusation in his eyes from last night was gone, replaced by a hollow confusion that mirrored my own. "A public disturbance," Ms. Albright said, clicking her pen. "That's what it comes down to. You'll both get an official warning on your student records. Do it again, and we start talking about suspension." She finally looked up, her gaze giving nothing away. "Whatever is going on between you two, handle it privately. The entire dorm doesn't need to be your audience." That was it. I was a problem. Mark was a problem. We were a disturbance, not victims of a calculated, cruel setup. Just two kids with too much drama. Case closed. The walk back across the quad was the longest walk of my life. Every pair of eyes felt like a physical weight. Whispers followed me like smoke. There she is. The one who cried wolf. The psycho ex. I saw a girl from my stats class turn to her friend and cover her mouth, their shoulders shaking with laughter. The shame was a hot flush that wouldn't go away. I didn't even look at Mark. We just walked, separated by a foot of air that felt like a canyon, and went our separate ways. Back in the room, Maya was there. She was a whirlwind of practiced concern. "Chloe! I am so sorry. I thought he was attacking you." I just panicked and texted him. I swear I was trying to help. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't find a single word to say. I just mumbled something about being tired and climbed onto my bed, pulling the covers up. I felt her stare on my back for a long moment before she sighed and left for class. The click of the door shutting was the loudest sound in the world. Alone. Finally, I was alone. But the feeling wasn't relief. It was a vacuum. Sleep didn't come. I just lay there for hours, the ceiling a blank white canvas for my thoughts to smear all over. The humiliation. The video. The message on my laptop. Mark's confused face in the floodlights. Maya's text. None of the pieces fit. They were from different puzzles, all thrown into the same box, and the box was my life. Exhaustion finally started to pull me under, hours later, when the room was dark and the only light came from the slit under the door. I was in that muddy space between awake and asleep when I heard it. A sound. Faint. A soft, dry scratching. It came from the wall, right beside my head. My first thought was simple. Stupid. Mice. Of course. This whole building was probably ancient. A shithole dorm with a mouse problem. It was almost a comfort. A normal problem. A problem I could understand. Annoyed, I bunched up my pillow and smacked it against the wall. Thump. Thump. The scratching stopped. I rolled over, pulling the blanket tight around my shoulders. Just a mouse. I closed my eyes, trying to force my brain to shut down, trying to find the off switch. But a few minutes later, it came back. Scratch, scratch. Scratch, a pause. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I went still. My eyes opened in the dark. That wasn't a mouse. That was a pattern. It was rhythmic, deliberate. A signal. My breath caught in my throat. The air in the room suddenly felt cold. The distant, normal sounds of the dorm, a door slamming down the hall, muffled laughter, faded away. There was only this room, this bed, this wall. Slowly, carefully, I pushed the covers back. I slid off the bed, my bare feet cold on the linoleum. I pressed my ear against the cheap, painted drywall. It felt cool and solid. The scratching was louder now, right against my ear, a dry, insistent sound, like a fingernail dragging on plasterboard. Scratch, scratch, scratch. My heart hammered against my ribs. A dare, a stupid, childish dare rose up in my mind. Answer it. My hand felt heavy, disconnected from my arm. I raised it. I curled my knuckles. I tapped lightly on the wall. Tap, tap. The scratching instantly stopped. A thick silence pressed in. I held my breath, waiting for what I didn't know. Then, from the other side of the wall, came the reply. Quick, sharp, perfect, tap, tap. A jolt went through me, an electric shock. I scrambled back from the wall, landing hard on my bed. My mouth was dry. A mouse doesn't tap back. A mouse doesn't answer. That was a person. Or something else. Something inside the wall. The tapping started again, but it was different now. Faster. Harder. Not a signal anymore. It was a frantic, desperate pounding. Bam, 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 bam. It sounded like someone was trapped, like they were trying to punch their way through the wall from the inside. The thin, dry wall vibrated against my bed frame. Then came the voice. It was faint, choked, compressed by the plaster and insulation. A woman's voice. Weak, terrified. Help! The sound was so broken, so full of pain. It was barely a word. It wasn't Maya. It wasn't Maya's voice at all. I snapped my head toward the other side of the room. Maya's bed was a lump of blankets in the dark. I could just make out the shape of her, the slow, even rise and fall of her breathing. She was asleep. Completely, totally asleep. She hadn't stirred, hadn't heard a thing. A wave of nausea washed over me. The pounding continued, a frantic drumbeat of terror from inside my wall. The muffled cries continued, a nightmare leaking into my room, and Maya was sleeping right through it. Am I dreaming? Am I losing my mind? The trap hadn't just been the floodlights. The trap was this, making me the crazy girl. The girl who hears things, the girl no one will believe. It was working. Rage, pure and sharp, cut through the fear. I wasn't going to be played with. I got off the bed, my fists clenched. I stood in the middle of the room, my body trembling, and I screamed at the wall. Who's there? Absolute silence. The pounding stopped. The voice was gone. The only sound was my own ragged breathing, echoing in the small room. The quiet was worse. It was a listening quiet. A waiting quiet. Then, from my desk, a soft electronic chime. My laptop. I had slammed it shut, but the screen was now glowing, casting a pale, cold light across my desk. I hadn't opened it. I watched, frozen, as the cursor moved on its own across the screen. A new window opened, a text-to-speech program, the default one that came with the computer. A digitized, toneless voice, the kind you hear on old GPS devices, filled the room. It was flat, unfeeling. It didn't come from the wall. It came from the speakers 2 feet away from me. Don't believe what you hear. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The voice in the wall was desperate, human, terrified. This voice was cold, mechanical, in complete control. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a monster. It was a person. A person who could set up a public spectacle. A person who could be inside the walls. A person who could hack my computer and make it speak. He was everywhere. He was listening right now. I stood there, pinned in place by the 2 conflicting terrors, the desperate pleas from within the wall and the cold, synthetic denial from my own laptop, until the sun came up. I didn't sleep. I just watched the laptop screen, which had gone dark again, waiting for it to light up. It never did. When the gray morning light finally filled the room, Maya stirred. She yawned, stretched, and looked at me. "God, Chloe, you look awful," she said, her voice scratchy with sleep. "You were up all night?" I just stared at her. After she left for her 8 a.m. class, I walked to the wall. It looked just like it always had. A plain, beige, boring wall. Was it real? Did any of it happen? My hand was shaking as I reached out and traced the surface. My fingers searched for anything. A thin spot. A seam. A hollow sound. And then I found it. Near the baseboard, almost hidden, was a tiny crack. A hairline fracture in the paint and plaster. It was new. I knew it was new. I would have seen it before. Kneeling down, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm, I looked closer. It was just a sliver, but it was deep enough to be a hole. I could see darkness inside. Driven by a need I didn't understand, a need for proof, I dug my fingernail into the crack. A small piece of plaster flaked away. Something inside glinted, catching the morning light. It wasn't a wire. It wasn't a nail. It was small, and it had a metallic sheen. Carefully, I worked my nail around it, widening the crack just enough. I pinched the object and pulled. It came free with a tiny scraping sound. I held it in the palm of my hand. It was an earring, a small, cheap, silver hoop. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Maya's. It was old. The silver was tarnished, and a tiny speck of something dark, dried blood, was crusted near the clasp. A physical piece of the nightmare. Proof. Proof that the voice, the person crying for help, was real. That someone else had been here. That this had happened before, and the earring had been in my wall this whole time, waiting. The silver hoop sat in my palm, a cold, dead weight. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't my imagination. It was real. Physical. Proof. The morning light spilling through the blinds felt wrong, too bright for the secret the room now held. I didn't wash my hands. I didn't make coffee. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the earring. Then at the small, fresh crack in the wall near the baseboard. The world outside my door kept moving, students yelling across the quad, the distant rumble of a garbage truck, but in here time had stopped. My fingers felt clumsy as I grabbed my laptop. A deep, gnawing need for answers pushed past the exhaustion. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just acted. I opened a web browser, the fan inside the old machine whirring to life. My hands were shaking. So much I mistyped the first time. Northgate University Dormitory. A bunch of useless links popped up. Housing applications, move-in day photos, campus life blogs. I added a new word. Death. Nothing. Missing. The search results shifted. Most were recent, unrelated. But then I saw it. A link to an archived article from a local newspaper, dated 5 years ago. The headline was simple. Unsensational. It hit me harder than any screaming tabloid would have. Student missing from Northgate dorms. My heart did a slow, painful lurch. A single, heavy thump against my ribs. I knew, even before I clicked, what I was going to find. My finger hovered over the trackpad for a second, a part of me screaming to close the laptop and throw it against the wall. To not know. To go back to 5 seconds ago when it was just a suspicion, I clicked. The page loaded slowly, image by image. There she was, a girl with dark hair and a wide, hopeful smile that didn't reach her eyes. The photo was a standard student ID picture, slightly washed out. Her name was Anne Duong, a sophomore. I read the words, but my eyes were fixed on the picture. On her left ear, on the small, silver hoop earring catching the photographer's flash. It was identical. No way, I whispered. The sound was swallowed by the room. It couldn't be. Coincidence. It had to be a coincidence. But my gut twisted. I forced my eyes down to the text. I skimmed past the quotes from her worried parents, the statement from the campus police. I was looking for one thing. And then I found it. Ms. Duong, a chemistry major, was last seen by her roommate on the evening of October 12th. She was reported missing the next morning when she failed to show up for a midterm exam. Her belongings were left untouched in her room in the East Tower. Room 217. Room 217. I looked up from the screen, my breath catching in my throat. I stared at the door to my own room. The cheap brass numbers tacked onto it. 217. This room. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a haunting. The voice crying for help. The desperate pounding. It was her. It was Anne. The earring wasn't planted by a stalker. It had been in there the whole time. Inside the wall. With her? A wave of ice-cold dread washed over me. I wasn't being harassed by a person. I was living in a tomb. The thought made me sick. The wall was no longer a wall. It was a gravestone. I slowly stood and walked toward it, my hand outstretched. I pressed my palm flat against the cool, painted surface. I could almost feel a vibration, a faint residual energy of the terror that had happened right here. Anne? I whispered to the plaster. Is that you? The stalker, the text messages, the video. All of it felt secondary now, like a cruel sideshow to the real horror. The real horror was here. It had been here for 5 years. I don't know how long I stood there, talking to the wall, before the door clicked open. Maya walked in, dropping her backpack on the floor. Hey, I grabbed you a coffee, she started, then stopped. She took in my appearance, my uncombed hair, my clothes from yesterday, the laptop open on the bed. Whoa, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. The irony of her words was a punch to the gut. I couldn't form a sentence. I just pointed, my hand trembling. First at the earring on my desk, then at the laptop screen still showing Anne's smiling face. Her name was Anne Duong, I managed to say, my voice cracking. She disappeared. From this room, Maya. This was her room. And this was her earring. I found it in the wall. Maya's eyes widened. She walked over, peering at the screen, then at the earring. She put a hand over her mouth. Oh my God, she whispered. Chloe, that's awful. Are you serious? The voice I heard last night, I said, the words tumbling out now, a frantic release of pressure. The crying. It was her. It has to be. She's trapped in there. She's trying to tell us something. Maya looked from the screen to the wall, and for a second I saw real fear in her eyes. I saw the same belief that was gripping me. I wasn't alone in this. She saw it too. She believed me. But then her expression shifted. The fear was replaced by a look of careful, measured concern. She put her hands on my shoulders. Okay, Chloe, okay, just breathe, she said, her voice dropping to a calm, rational tone that felt completely out of place. Let's think about this for a second, logically. Her use of the word logically was like a splash of cold water. You are being stalked, she said, her eyes locked on mine. By a very smart, very sick person. Someone who could hack your laptop. Someone who staged that whole thing with Mark. Don't you think a person like that could find this old news story? I stared at her, my mind stumbling. What? No, Maya, the earring. He could have planted it. She cut me off, her grip on my shoulders tightening slightly. Think. He could have made a small hole, pushed it in and covered it up. He's trying to make you lose your mind, Chloe. He's using this poor girl's story to mess with you. It's called gaslighting. He wants you to doubt everything. He wants you to think you are hearing ghosts. Her words were a poison. They made a terrifying kind of sense. The message on my laptop came rushing back. Don't believe. What? You. Here. Was that the stalker's true message? A taunt? A warning not to fall for the trap he himself had set? My mind reeled. Ghost or stalker, trapped spirit or manipulative psycho. The two possibilities warred in my head, each one more terrifying than the last. One meant the laws of reality were broken. The other meant I was the target of a brilliant, cruel-minded predator who was steps ahead of me. I looked at Maya's earnest, concerned face, and then at the blank, silent wall. I didn't know what to believe. And that was the most frightening thing of all. I was trapped, not between four walls, but between two nightmares. Night fell. I didn't go to class. I didn't eat. I sat on my bed, watching the light outside my window fade from orange to purple to black. Every creak of the old building made me jump. Every whisper in the hallway felt like a threat. Maya was trying to be normal, studying at her desk with headphones on, but I could feel her watching me. The air was thick with things unsaid. Sleep was an impossible thought. My body was humming with a low-frequency fear that wouldn't shut off. It happened around 2 a.m. A sharp click echoed from the hallway, followed by a collective groan from other rooms. Then, darkness. The entire floor's power had been cut. My desk lamp went out. Maya's lamp went out. The only light was the faint, indifferent glow of the emergency exit sign at the end of the hall, casting long, distorted shadows into our room. Great, Maya muttered, pulling off her headphones. Probably a blown fuse. Silence descended. It was heavier this time. Not just quiet, but a dead, waiting blackness. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. Then a new light appeared. A soft, pulsating blue glow from the corner of the room, near Maya's desk. It was from the smart speaker she'd bought last week. I had forgotten it was even there. It shouldn't have power. It shouldn't be on. It began to hum, a low electronic thrum that vibrated through the floor. A crackle of static broke the silence, and then the voice. It was faint, woven through the static, but unmistakable. The same broken, desperate voice from the wall. Anne's voice. Chloe. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up. It was her. She was using the speaker. Help me, in the wall. Oh my God, Maya breathed from her bed. She heard it too. It was real. But as soon as the hope flared in my chest, it was extinguished. The voice was cut off by a harsh, grating buzz, like a fly being zapped. The static intensified, and then a different voice erupted from the speaker. It was the synthetic, toneless voice from my laptop. Flat. Cold. Inhumanly loud in the small, dark room. It didn't plead. It commanded. She is dead. The words hit me like a physical blow. You are next. A sudden, violent hum, and the lights flickered back on. All of them. The overhead fluorescent light, my desk lamp, Maya's lamp. They flared to life with a blinding intensity. The smart speaker went dark. The room was silent again. The shift from pitch black and terrifying noise to sterile, buzzing silence was so abrupt, it made me feel dizzy. I whipped my head toward Maya. She was sitting straight up in her bed, her back ramrod straight. Her face was a mask of shock, pale and waxen under the harsh light. Her mouth was slightly open, her eyes wide and fixed on the silent speaker. She looked terrified. She looked like a victim, just like me. But then my eyes dropped lower, to her hands. They weren't empty. She was clutching something in her lap, a small, dark object held in a white-knuckled grip. It was a piece of wood, intricately carved into the shape of a small bird. A raven, maybe, or a crow. It was smooth, dark, and foreign. I had never seen it before. Her face screamed terror, but her hands told a different story, a secret story. And in that silent, buzzing, overlit room, I realized the voice from the wall and the voice from the speaker were just the storm on the surface. The real threat, the deep, cold, unknown current, was sitting on a bed 5 feet away from me. The humming was the worst part. The lights, all of them, blazed with a manic electric energy, a high-pitched tone that vibrated in my teeth. The silence AN's voice and the machine's voice had left behind was now filled with this sterile, buzzing glare. My eyes were fixed on Maya. She sat on her bed, a statue carved from fear, pale, wide-eyed. Her mouth hung open. She looked exactly how I felt, a victim. Then my gaze fell to her hands, to the small, dark piece of wood she clutched, the carved bird. It was smooth and stark against the white of her knuckles. She'd never had anything like that before. It didn't belong here. It was an intrusion, just like the voice from the speaker, just like the earring in the wall. Maya? My own voice was a dry croak. What is that? She flinched like I'd screamed. Her eyes darted from the silent speaker to me, then down to her own hands as if she'd forgotten what was in them. She looked at the bird. A flicker of something I couldn't name crossed her face. Not fear, something else. Annoyance? She quickly shoved it under her pillow, her movements jerky and unnatural. Nothing, she said, her voice too high. It's nothing. Just a good luck charm. My mom sent it to me. My mom sent it to me. The lie was so thin it was transparent. It hung in the buzzing air between us. The emergency was over. The voices were gone, but the real horror was just beginning. It was sitting on the bed across from me, pulling the comforter up to her chin with hands that had just been clutching a secret. We should call security, I stammered, my brain starting to reboot. And tell them what? Maya shot back, her voice suddenly sharp. That our speaker said a dead girl's name? That it said, "You're next"? They'll think we're on drugs, Chloe. They'll send us to the campus shrink. She was right. It sounded insane. And maybe that was the point. The thought chilled me. Maybe the whole performance was designed to isolate us, to make us too scared to tell anyone, because no one would ever believe it. I need to get out of here, I said, swinging my legs off the bed. No, Maya said, her voice firm. It stopped me cold. Don't. That's what he wants. For you to run out into the dark. We stay here. We lock the door. We don't make a sound until morning. It's the only way. Her logic was a cage. It made perfect sense, and it trapped me right where I was. Trapped me in a brightly lit room with her. The carved bird was under her pillow. Her face was a mask of concern. Her hands, I knew, were trembling. But were they trembling from fear or from something else? Sleep was not an option. It wasn't even a distant possibility. Maya eventually turned off her lamp, plunging her side of the room into shadow. But I sat up, back against the headboard, watching the closed door. The humming from the overhead light finally stopped after an hour, a breaker somewhere resetting itself, plunging the room into the normal, dim glow of the campus lights outside. The silence that followed was worse. Every creak of the pipes, every distant siren, every laugh from a group of students walking past the dorm was a potential threat. My body was a tightly coiled spring of pure adrenaline. Sometime after 4 a.m., I got up. I had to be sure. I crept to the door. My hand touched the cold metal of the knob. I turned the deadbolt. Click. Locked. I turned it back. Unlocked. I did it again. Click. Locked. A third time. A fourth. A fifth. It became a ritual. A prayer in clicks. It wasn't enough. My eyes scanned the room. The cheap wooden desk chair. It was heavy. Solid. I dragged it across the floor, the scraping sound loud in the quiet room. Maya stirred but didn't wake. I wedged the back of the chair directly under the doorknob. No one was getting in. I backed away, my heart still a frantic drum against my ribs, and finally collapsed into bed, staring at my makeshift barricade until the gray light of dawn began to seep through the blinds. When I woke, it was to the smell of coffee. Sunlight streamed into the room. For a split second, a single, blissful second, everything was normal. Then I remembered. I shot upright. I looked at the door. The chair was gone. It was tucked neatly back into its spot at Maya's desk, as if it had never been moved. My blood ran cold. "Morning," Maya said. She was sitting at the desk, sipping from a mug. She looked tired, but calm. Too calm. "You finally crashed. Figured I'd let you sleep in." I couldn't speak. I just pointed a trembling finger at the chair. The chair," I managed. Maya followed my gaze. She frowned. "Oh yeah, that. You were sleepwalking last night, Chloe." The words didn't register at first. "What?" "Yeah," she said, taking another sip of coffee. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "It was maybe an hour after you got back in bed. You got up, totally zoned out, dragged the chair back to the desk, and then went back to sleep." "You don't remember?" I stared at her. My mind was a complete blank. I remembered the fear. I remembered the clicks of the lock. I remembered jamming the chair under the knob with all my strength. I did not remember moving it back. "It was really creepy," she added, her voice a little shaky now. "Honestly, I was too scared to say anything at the time." A wave of nausea rolled over me. Could I have? Was the stress, the fear, making me do things I couldn't remember? The stalker's message from the laptop flashed in my mind. "Don't believe." What? You, here. But what if it wasn't about the ghost? What if it was about my own mind? Am I going crazy? The thought was a hook that sank deep into my gut. Maybe Maya was right. Maybe this whole thing, the ghost, the stalker, maybe it was all designed to make me break. And maybe it was working. I skipped my morning classes. I couldn't face the crowded hallways, the normal chatter of students. I felt fragile, like a piece of glass about to shatter. I needed to get out, to breathe air that wasn't contaminated by the events of last night. I left Maya in the room, telling her I was going to the library. I just walked. I walked around the campus, aimlessly, my keys and pepper spray clutched in my jacket pocket. The sun felt good on my skin, a temporary lie that everything was okay. When I got back to the dorm in the late afternoon, my heart stopped. The door to our room, 217, was ajar, just an inch. A dark slit of wrongness in the long, empty hallway. Maya and I had a rule, an unbreakable rule. Last one out locks the door. Every single time. Maya had classes until 5. She should still be gone. "Shit," I whispered. My blood turned to ice water. He was in there. Or something was. I pulled the pepper spray from my pocket, my thumb finding the trigger. My breath was shallow, loud in my ears. I pushed the door open with my foot, slowly, ready for anything. The room was empty. No one jumped out, no one was hiding behind the door. I did a slow, careful sweep. Closet, under the beds, empty. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. A false alarm. Maybe I forgot to pull the door shut all the way. Maybe a maintenance guy. Then I saw my bed. It wasn't a mess. It was a violation. My textbooks were swept onto the floor. My pillows were thrown against the wall. And in the very center of my mattress, sticking straight up from the quilted fabric, was a knife. It was a small paring knife from our kitchenette drawer, but the way it was placed, plunged into the spot where my heart would be if I was lying down, felt like a declaration of war. My stomach lurched, and then I saw it, lying next to the handle of the knife, a small, glossy rectangle. A Polaroid photo. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely pick it up. I turned it over. It was a picture of me, sleeping. The photo was taken from above, at close range. So close I could see the faint line of drool on the corner of my mouth. I could see the individual strands of my messy hair on the pillow. The angle was impossible. It was taken by someone standing directly over me, inches from my face, while I was dead to the world. He was in the room. While I was sleeping, he stood right there, watching me. A strangled sound escaped my throat. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the opposite wall. The room felt like it was closing in. The air was thick, unbreathable. I fumbled for my phone. My fingers felt like clumsy sausages. I dialed Maya's number. It went straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's Maya. Leave a message." I tried again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Where the hell was she? panic, began to claw its way up my throat. I had to get out. I had to tell someone. I couldn't stay here another second. The photo was burning a hole in my hand. He was here. He was close. That's when I heard it. A sound from down the hall. The unmistakable sound of running water from the communal bathroom. A shower. Then a soft thud, like a shampoo bottle being set down on the tile. He's still here. The thought was pure, undiluted terror. He's in the bathroom. He never left the floor. A crazy idea, born of pure flight or fight adrenaline, exploded in my brain. The bathroom door. It locked from the outside. A simple slide bolt for the janitors. If I could get to it, I could trap him. I could lock him in and scream for help. It was insane. It was my only chance. I didn't think. I just moved. I burst out of my room and sprinted down the hallway. The tile was cold under my socked feet. The sound of the shower grew louder. 10 feet. 5 feet. My hand was outstretched, reaching for the metal bolt. The bathroom door flew open. I skidded to a halt, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. Maya stood in the doorway, wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping wet. She blinked, startled, seeing me frozen in the middle of the hall like a wild animal. Steam billowed out from behind her. "Chloe?" she said, her voice full of confusion. "What is wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't answer. My mind was a car crash of relief and confusion. It was her. It was just her. I stared at her wet hair, at the droplets of water on her collarbone. My eyes traveled down to her hands, which were busy tightening the towel around her chest. Then I saw it, on the soft, pale skin of her left forearm, just below the wrist. A thin, red line. A scratch. It was fresh, still pink and angry, like it had been made by a fingernail, or maybe by the sharp edge of a mattress spring you were carelessly leaning over. We walked back to the room in silence. I was numb. My brain refused to connect the dots. It couldn't. It was too monstrous. Maya saw the state of my bed. The knife. She gasped, putting a hand to her mouth. "Oh my God, Chloe, did somebody?" I just nodded, watching her. Her reaction was perfect. Shock, fear, concern. She walked over to the door, checking the lock. She shook her head, her voice a low murmur of anger. "God, I knew it. Someone left the door unlocked again. Some idiot on this floor. We could have been robbed. Or worse." Her words slammed into me. A wave of cold so profound, it felt like dying. Someone left the door unlocked again. I looked at her. Really looked at her wide, innocent eyes, at her trembling lower lip. And then I looked down at the angry red scratch on her wrist, the scratch she got while leaning over my bed, plunging a knife into my mattress, carefully placing a photograph right next to it. You didn't find the door unlocked, Maya. You just forgot to lock it on your way out. The silence in the room was a physical weight. I watched her. I watched her towel dry her hair, her movements unbothered, easy. I watched the small red line on her forearm, the scratch. My mind kept playing it on a loop. Maya leaning over my bed, Maya's hand plunging the knife into the mattress, Maya's fingers placing the Polaroid just so. My friend, my roommate, the monster. My own body was a stranger. It wanted to scream, to run, to claw at her face, but my brain, a cold, terrified part of my brain, took over. Survive. That's all that mattered now. I had to act normal. I was locked in a cage with a predator who thought I was still just another animal in the zoo. "Are you okay?" she asked, tossing the damp towel onto her chair. Her voice was full of that perfect, fake concern. "You're still so pale. Seeing that knife. God, Chloe, we have to report it." I made myself nod. My throat was dry. "Yeah," I managed to say. The word felt like swallowing sand. "Yeah, we should." She smiled, a small, reassuring smile that made my stomach clench. "Okay. Let's just breathe for a minute. I'll make us some tea." She moved toward the kitchenette, a small corner of the room with a hot plate and a mini fridge. I didn't take my eyes off her. Every step she took was a threat. Pretend. Just pretend. I sat on my bed, careful to avoid the violated center. I pulled my laptop onto my legs, opening it to a blank document. I typed a few random words, trying to look like a student catching up on work. But my eyes were glued to her reflection in the dark screen. A few days passed in this new, awful reality. I was a method actor in the worst role of my life. I went to class. I ate with her in the cafeteria. I laughed at her stupid jokes, and every second I felt a screaming panic just under my skin. I was watching her every move, analyzing every word, searching for another crack in the mask. On Wednesday, the crack appeared. I came back from my afternoon seminar to find a yellow slip stuck to our door. A package notification. It was for her. "Oh, cool," she said, pulling it from the door. Probably the textbook I ordered. My heart started a low, heavy pounding. We walked down to the dorm mailroom on the ground floor. It was a small, windowless room lined with brass-colored mailboxes. The clerk, a bored-looking senior, took her slip and disappeared into the back. He returned with a small, brown paper-wrapped package about the size of a shoebox. "Here you go," he said, sliding it across the counter. Maya signed for it, her back to me. For just a second, the clerk's hand was gone, and the package sat there alone. My eyes darted to the return address label in the top left corner. There was no name, no street, no city, no zip code. There was only a symbol. It was burned into the paper. A small, strange bird, its wings spread wide, enclosed in a circle. The exact same design as the wooden carving she'd hidden under her pillow. A cold shock went through me. It wasn't a good luck charm from her mom. It was from them. Or him. Or whatever the hell this was. It was a network. A system. And she was a part of it. The mailman was a part of it. How deep did it go? "Ah, cool." She picked up the box, turning back to me with a bright smile. "Want to go grab dinner?" I felt the blood drain from my face. I nodded. What else could I do? My chance came that evening. Maya said she was going to use the bigger showers down on the second floor, complaining that ours had no water pressure. The second she left, a towel over her shoulder and her shower caddy in hand, I moved. There was no time to think. Adrenaline was a fire in my veins. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to be steady. Her desk was neat. Too neat. I checked the drawers, textbooks, pens, old receipts. Nothing. I went to her closet. I pushed aside her clothes, my fingers brushing against the fabric. My heart was a drum against my ribs. What am I even looking for? Then I saw it. At the bottom of her closet, tucked under a pile of sweaters, was a battered-looking backpack. It wasn't one I'd ever seen her use. I pulled it out. It was heavier than it looked. I unzipped the main compartment. It was full of clothes. I dug my hand in, pushing them aside. My fingers hit something hard and flat. A book. I pulled it out. It was an old journal, the black leather cover cracked and worn. It had no title. I opened it. The world stopped. It wasn't a diary. The pages were filled with frantic, spidery handwriting and bizarre, unsettling sketches. There were diagrams of our dorm building, with hallways and rooms circled in red ink. There were crude drawings of a human figure lying on a bed. There were pages filled with that same symbol from the package, the bird in the circle, drawn over and over again. And then I saw the words. They were written under a detailed sketch of our room, room 217. The cleansing ritual. The vessel must be prepared. The old spirit, An, is a contamination, weak but stubborn. She clings to the walls. She must be purged before the transference. The new vessel, Chloe, is strong, unaware, perfect. She will need to be broken first. The fear seasons the soul. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't breathe. My name. She wrote my name, next to Anne's. I flipped through the pages with a trembling hand. More notes. Details about my class schedule. The name of my hometown. The fact that I was afraid of spiders. Tiny, insignificant details she had picked up from our conversations, all recorded here like a scientist studying a lab rat. This wasn't a stalker. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't random violence. It was her. It was always her. My whole body went cold. The trust I'd had, the friendship I thought was real, It all evaporated in an instant, leaving a black hole in its place. Why? What did she want? What the hell was transference? My phone buzzed on the desk. The sound made me jump so hard, I almost dropped the journal. I slammed it shut, my hands slick with sweat. I looked at the screen. Maya. My blood froze. She was calling me. Did she forget something? Was she on her way back? I shoved the journal back into the backpack, jammed it under the sweaters in her closet, and scrambled back to my side of the room. My heart was going to explode. I answered the phone, trying to make my voice sound normal. Hello? Silence. Then, a crackle of static. And then, the voice. The same dead, synthesized electronic voice from the smart speaker. You found it, didn't you? I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. It knew. It knew I had found the book. How? How could it possibly know? Knew. It's too late, the voice droned. Then the electronic voice was gone. It was replaced by a whisper. A real whisper, so close it felt like it was right in my ear. It was Maya's voice. You shouldn't have snooped, Chloe. A floorboard creaked behind me. Slowly, I lowered the phone from my ear. I turned around. Maya was standing in the doorway. She wasn't wet. She wasn't holding a shower caddy. She must have been standing there for minutes, watching me. The phone in her hand was dark. She hadn't been calling me at all. Her face was calm. And she was smiling. It wasn't her usual friendly smile. This one didn't touch her eyes. It was a thin, sharp, terrible curve of her lips that made my skin crawl more than any knife, any disembodied voice. She knew. You, I stammered, backing away until my legs hit the frame of my bed. It was all you? My voice was a useless, broken thing. Maya took a step into the room, letting the door click shut behind her. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Her smile widened. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. Not exactly, she said, her voice light, conversational. I'm just the guide. She raised her hands, palms up, as if she were about to conduct an orchestra. And then it happened. A soft scraping sound from the kitchenette. I glanced over. The metal spoon in the mug of tea she'd made earlier was trembling. It lifted, slowly, out of the mug, tea dripping from its tip. It hung in the air, wobbling. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. Then my keys, sitting on my desk, began to rattle. They lifted off the wood, a silver cluster of metal and plastic, and floated up to join the spoon. A fork followed. The paper clips and a cup on Maya's desk. The metal zipper on my jacket hanging on the chair. One by one, every piece of loose metal in the room rose into the air. They drifted slowly, silently, until they were all hovering in the space between us. Then, all at once, they turned. Every single object. The spoon, the fork, the keys, the dozens of paper clips. They all spun in midair to point directly at me, an army of tiny, gleaming spearheads. This wasn't a killer. This wasn't a psycho. This was something else. Something impossible. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the cold, solid wall. My mind was screaming. And then I heard another scream. Not mine. It was a voice I recognized. Faint, desperate, coming from inside the wall I was pressed against. It was Anne's voice, raw with terror. Run! It wants your soul! Maya's smile finally faltered. She frowned, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. She glanced at the wall where the voice had come from. Annoying bitch, she muttered, as if swatting away a fly. You were supposed to have faded by now. My body tried to move before my brain did. A pure animal instinct to bolt. The door. I had to get to the door. I lunged, a clumsy, desperate scramble, my feet tangling in the rug. My hand was almost on the knob. She was there. Maya hadn't run. She hadn't even moved fast. She just stepped, one fluid motion, placing her body between me and the exit. She reached out and the lock clicked into place. A sound so small, so final. It was the sound of a cage door closing. The army of metal objects still hung in the air between us, a cloud of silent, pointed threats. My keys, her paper clips, the spoon. My gaze darted between them and her face. The smile was gone now, replaced by a look of serene, businesslike calm. You're not going anywhere, Chloe, she said. Her voice was her own again, soft and reasonable. It was the most awful sound in the world. Tonight is the last night. On My own voice was a cracked whisper. I could still hear the ghost's cry echoing from the walls, a fading wave of terror. "The ghost!" she tried to warn me. Maya's expression tightened into a flicker of annoyance, the same way someone would react to a fly buzzing in their ear. "An wasn't my friend," she stated, as if correcting a minor error on a test. "She was my cousin." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. "Cousin?" The words didn't connect. They were just sounds. My mind, overloaded and screaming, tried to piece it together. The Polaroids. The journal. The package with the symbol. It wasn't about a ghost haunting a room. It was about a family. "What?" I managed, backing away. My legs hit my bed, and I almost collapsed onto the mattress, onto the torn spot where she had plunged the knife. "What do you want?" "It's not what I want," she said, taking a slow step forward. The metal objects drifted with her, a personal bodyguard of floating shrapnel. "It's what it wants. Anne brought it here. Or it found her. It doesn't matter. She made a deal with it for something stupid. Popularity. Good grades. It gave them to her, but it hollowed her out. She wasn't strong enough to pay the price. So she did the only thing she could think of." Maya gestured to the wall. "She took a bottle of her father's pills and checked out. Right here, in this room. A stupid, weak way out. But her spirit was too scared to leave. It got stuck. A contamination." My blood ran cold. The official story. The one everyone knew. Anne had just disappeared. A missing person. A mystery. It was all a lie. A cover-up. "It needs a new host," Maya continued, her voice clinical, detached, like a biologist explaining a parasite. "A new vessel. The old one is tainted, faded. It needs a soul that's strong enough to contain it." Anne was weak. Frightened from the start. "But you, Chloe." Her eyes locked onto mine. There was something like admiration in them. It made my skin crawl. "You're different. You're a fighter. You didn't crumble. You didn't run crying to the RA after the first whisper. You locked the door. You tried to figure it out. You fought back." She smiled that thin, terrible smile again. "That was my contribution. My test. The knife. The pictures. The voice. I had to be sure you were the right one. That you had resilience. Fear seasons the soul, makes it richer. And you, Chloe, you're perfect." The truth hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't a random victim. I was a candidate. I wasn't being haunted. I was being vetted. Every sleepless night, every second of fear, every jump at a sudden noise. It was an interview. A job application for my own damnation. A trap inside a trap. I thought I was fighting a monster, but I was just proving my worth to it. My breath hitched. My eyes darted around the room, looking for anything. A weapon. An escape I'd missed. There was nothing. Just me, her, and the floating metal. "Now," she said, her voice dropping, taking on a formal, ceremonial tone. "It's time to prepare the vessel." She knelt, unzipping the battered backpack she'd hidden in her closet. The one with the journal. She didn't take out the book. Instead, she began pulling out other items. Small, wooden carvings. Each one was about the size of her palm, carved from dark wood and bearing that same symbol of the bird in the circle. There were at least a dozen of them. One by one, she began to place them on the floor. She moved with a purpose, a practiced efficiency that was terrifying to watch. She laid them out in a large, perfect circle in the center of the room, the space between my bed and hers. As she placed the last one, a low hum filled the air. It wasn't a sound you so much heard as you felt, a vibration in the bones of your skull, a pressure in your chest. The air in the room grew cold, not just cool, but a deep, biting cold that had nothing to do with the weather outside. I could see my own breath misting in front of my face. The light from the desk lamp seemed to dim, to shrink away from the circle on the floor. Darkness began to bleed out from the corners of the room, not like a normal shadow, but like black ink spilling into water. It crawled across the floor, thick and oily, pooling around Maya and the circle of carvings. "No!" Anne's voice screamed from the wall again. It was weaker this time, filled with a raw, desperate agony. "It will eat you. Don't let it." Her voice was cut off, choked into a pained gurgle. The wall where the sound came from shuddered, a fine shower of plaster dust falling to the floor. Maya didn't even look. "Pest," she muttered, She stood up, dusting off her hands. She was inside the circle now, the darkness swirling around her ankles. She looked at me and raised her hand. An invisible force slammed into me. It wasn't a push. It was a weight. A mountain of pressure crushed me from all sides, forcing the air from my lungs in a sharp gasp. My knees buckled. I crashed to the floor, my cheek hitting the cheap linoleum with a sickening thud. I couldn't move. I couldn't even twitch a finger. It was like every muscle in my body had been turned to stone, pinned to the ground by an immense, hateful gravity. Panic, pure and absolute, tore through my mind. I was trapped. I was completely helpless. I could only lie there, my head turned to the side, watching as the darkness swirled faster and faster around Maya. The humming grew louder, a sound of immense power being drawn into one spot. I squeezed my eyes shut. I couldn't watch. This can't be happening. This is not real. But then, in the darkness behind my own eyelids, I heard a new voice. Or rather, a feeling, a thought that wasn't mine. "Chloe, look at me." It was Anne, not her screaming voice from the wall, but a clear, calm thought inside my head. I opened my eyes, not in the room, but in my mind. I saw it. I saw her, a ghostly, translucent image of a girl with dark hair, her form flickering like a bad TV signal. She was on her knees, and all around her, the shadows were tearing at her. They had claws made of smoke and teeth of utter blackness. They were ripping pieces from her, and with every piece they took, her image grew fainter. She was disintegrating. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a pain I couldn't imagine. She wasn't screaming anymore. She was just enduring. She was using the last of whatever she was to show me this, to give me one last chance. Look. The thought was urgent. In my mind's eye, she raised a shimmering, phantom hand. She pointed a finger first at her own chest, at the swirling vortex of shadows where her heart should have been. The connection. Then, she slowly, deliberately, pointed at my hand, my real hand, pinned to the floor in the dorm room. I didn't understand. I tried to look down, but my body wouldn't obey. I focused my will, forcing my consciousness back into my physical form. My fingers were curled into a tight fist. My knuckles were white. The pressure inside my palm was sharp. For the first time, I realized I was clutching something. I had been clutching it ever since I fell. The earring. The small silver hoop I had found on the floor. Anne's earring. The message slammed into my brain with the force of a revelation. It wasn't about fighting Maya. It wasn't about fighting the shadows. It was about the link. The object. The thing from the old vessel that was anchoring the ritual to the new one. Anne wasn't just warning me. She was giving me the weapon. I opened my eyes. The room was almost completely dark now, except for a sick, purple-black light emanating from the circle of carvings. Maya stood in the center, her eyes closed, her arms outstretched. She was chanting now, muttering words in a language that scraped at my ears, a series of harsh, guttural sounds that made the air itself seem to curdle. The cloud of metal objects had been drawn into the circle, swirling around her like a storm of razor blades. She was lost in the ritual. She wasn't paying attention to me. This was it. My only shot. My body was still a prison of stone, but the connection with An had given me something. A crack in the pressure. A single point of focus. My right arm. I poured every ounce of will I possessed into that arm. The muscles shrieked in protest. The joints felt like they were grinding to dust. The pressure fought me, 1,000 pounds of invisible force pinning me down. But I pushed back. My fingers, stiff and numb, began to uncurl, slower than ice melting, a millimeter at a time. Sweat beaded on my forehead, stinging my eyes. Come on. Come on. My fist opened. The small silver hoop lay in my palm. Maya's chanting grew louder, reaching a crescendo. The darkness around her began to rise, coalescing into a single towering shape behind her. It was now or never. With a final desperate surge of strength that felt like it was tearing my arm from its socket, I moved. It wasn't a throw. It was a flick, a pathetic, spastic jerk of my hand. The silver earring flew from my palm. It tumbled through the air, a tiny, insignificant arc of light in the growing darkness. It spun end over end, heading not for Maya, but for the very center of the ritual circle on the floor. It landed. For a single, awful second, Nothing happened. Then, a sound. Not a loud explosion, but a sharp crack, like a pane of glass shattering under immense pressure. A flash of brilliant, clean, white light erupted from the spot where the earring fell. It vaporized the darkness, incinerated the swirling metal objects into dust, and blasted outwards. Maya's eyes flew open. Her chanting stopped. The towering shadow behind her dissolved. She turned her head towards me, a look of pure, unadulterated shock on her face. Then she screamed. It wasn't a human sound. It was a shriek of tearing metal and splitting soul, a noise of pure agony and loss that ripped through the room and shredded the silence into a million pieces. The shriek tore through the white light, a sound that ended in a wet, choking pop. My ears rang. The pressure that had pinned me to the floor vanished in an instant, leaving behind a deep, aching pain in every joint. Ozone, sharp and clean like after a lightning strike, filled my lungs. I blinked, spots dancing in my vision. The world swam back into focus. Maya was on the other side of the room. She wasn't standing. She'd been thrown, slammed against the wall beneath the window with enough force to crack the drywall. She was a limp pile of limbs, her head lolled to one side at an angle that wasn't right. Unconscious. Or worse. A thin line of blood trickled from her nostril. I was on my hands and knees. The floor was cold. My arm felt like it had been ripped out and shoved back in crooked. But I could move. I could breathe. The circle of wooden carvings was gone. Not just scattered. They were ash. Fine black dust that coated the linoleum in a perfect, dead circle. The metal objects that had swirled around her were gone too. Vaporized. The only thing left in the center of the ring of ash was the small silver hoop earring, glinting under the desk lamp. It was over. The thought was a lifeline. It was over. I won. My body moved on its own. Legs screamed, muscles burned, but they worked. I pushed myself up, stumbling, using the edge of my bed for support. The door. My whole world shrank to that one rectangle of wood. The lock. The hallway. Freedom. I lurched towards it, a clumsy, three-legged run. My hand closed around the cool metal of the doorknob. I twisted. Nothing happened. I twisted again, harder, throwing my shoulder into it. The knob didn't budge. The bolt didn't move. It was like trying to turn a piece of steel welded to its frame. No, I whispered, the sound raw in my throat. No, no, no. I jiggled it. I rattled it. I slammed my fist against the wood. It was useless, solid, sealed, and then I heard it. A laugh. It wasn't Maya's voice. It wasn't the electronic rasp from the phone. This was different. It came from everywhere at once. From the ceiling. From the floor. From inside my own head. It was a low, slow chuckle. A sound like stones, grinding together deep underground. It was ancient and vast, and filled with a cold, patient amusement. My blood turned to ice. My hand dropped from the doorknob. A mistake. I had made a terrible mistake. My eyes shot back to Maya's crumpled form against the wall. She wasn't the master. The ritual, the chanting, the circle. She was just the one knocking on the door. She wasn't the thing I was fighting. She was the one who had invited it in. The earring didn't defeat it. It just broke the doorbell. It was already inside. The laugh faded, leaving a silence that was worse. The darkness in the corners of the room, the shadows that the white light had momentarily blasted away, began to move. It wasn't a natural crawl of shadows as a light source dies. This was different. The darkness pulled away from the walls, detaching itself. It flowed like thick black oil across the floor, pooling in the center of the room right over the circle of ash. It didn't spread. It gathered. It rose. It wasn't smoke. It was an absence. A hole in the world, pulling itself upright. It formed a shape, tall and impossibly thin, a silhouette cut out of reality. It had long limbs and a posture that was nearly human, but wrong. Too rigid, too sharp. There was no face, no features, just a smooth, dark void. And then, from the blackness where a head should be, 2 points of light ignited. They were not eyes. They were embers, the color of dying stars, burning with a light that gave no illumination, only a sense of immense, crushing age. I was frozen. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. My mind was a blank wall of static. Everything I had done, every moment of terror, every small victory felt like a child's game. This was the real thing, the thing An had tried to escape, the thing Maya had tried to serve. It stood there, motionless, for a second that stretched into an eternity. I waited for it to turn its burning gaze on me. I braced for the end. But it didn't look at me. It didn't even seem to register my existence. The 2 points of light swiveled, slow and deliberate, and fixed on the heap on the floor. On Maya, understanding hit me like a physical blow, knocking the last bit of air from my lungs. It wasn't here for me. It never was. I was the test. The appetizer. The thing that seasoned the soul of the main course. It didn't want a fighter. It wanted a servant. It wanted a vessel that had been prepared, hollowed out, made ready. It wanted the one who had opened the gate. It wanted its priestess. The shadow thing took a step. It made no sound. The air warped around its foot as it moved. It was a slow, deliberate motion, like a predator that knows its prey is already dead. It was moving toward Maya. It was going to claim her. My feet were glued to the floor. My brain was screaming one word: run, hide, let it happen. She did this. She deserves this. Let it take her. But my eyes were locked on Maya's face. The trickle of blood, the slack jaw. The girl who had laughed at my jokes C-1 hour ago. The psycho who had tried to sacrifice me. The vessel. The victim. I don't know why I did it. There was no thought. No heroism. It was just an impulse, a wire that crossed in my panicked brain. A final, desperate act of defiance against the impossible thing in my room. My gaze flickered down. The ash. The circle. The floor was littered with the debris from Maya's attack, splintered pieces of the bed frame. My eyes landed on a piece of dark wood from one of the shattered carvings. A jagged shard, half the size of my hand. The thing took another silent step. I moved. My legs unlocked. I dove, snatching the wooden shard from the floor. The splintered edges bit into my palm. I scrambled to my feet and threw myself forward, not toward the door, but toward the center of the room. I planted my feet between the towering shadow and Maya's unconscious body. I held the shard out in front of me like a knife. It was a ridiculous, futile gesture, a twig against a hurricane. The thing stopped. For the first time since it formed, it seemed to notice me. The 2 burning embers that served as its eyes swiveled from Maya and locked onto my face. The cold in the room intensified, seeping into my bones. The silent pressure returned, a weight pressing in on my skull. A thought, not my own, bloomed in my mind. It wasn't a voice. It was a feeling, a block of frigid, alien comprehension forced into my consciousness. You protect it? The query was not curious. It was baffled. It was the detached puzzlement of a god looking at an ant that had just tried to bite its foot. It could not comprehend my action. Protect the vessel? The offering? Why? Isak. I couldn't answer. My teeth were chattering too hard. I just stood there, shaking, holding a useless piece of wood, shielding the monster who had tried to destroy me from the god she worshipped. And then, from the wall, a new sound. A whisper. So faint, it was barely there. It was Anne's voice, but not a scream. It was soft, tired. Thank you. The whisper faded into nothing, and as it did, the wall where her voice had always come from groaned. A sharp, cracking sound, like ice breaking underfoot. A line appeared in the plaster. It spiderwebbed outwards, fast. Dust rained down. With a final, deep groan of stressed timber and old supports, a whole section of the wall beside my bed buckled inwards and collapsed. It didn't reveal brick or insulation. It revealed a space, a dark, narrow opening. It wasn't a tomb. It was a doorway. The thought didn't form. The action just happened. A command from some lizard part of my brain that bypassed all logic, all self-preservation. Move. The shadow thing's bafflement was a gift, a split second of hesitation. It was more than I deserved. I dropped the useless shard of wood. The clatter was loud in the suddenly silent room. I lunged, my hands hooking under Maya's armpits. Her body was a dead weight, heavy and limp. My back screamed in protest. My legs burned. I didn't care. I dragged. Her heels scraped against the dusty floorboards, a sound like sandpaper on bone. One foot, then another. I dug my own feet in, leaning back, pulling her away from the center of the room, away from the abomination she had summoned, away from the offering and toward the wound in the wall, the hole in reality, my only way out. The entity's pinprick eyes followed our slow, pathetic retreat. The telepathic presence in my head shifted from confusion to something else, a flicker of cold, rising anger. It could have crossed the room in a blink. It could have ended me, but it didn't. It just watched, as if daring me, as if amused by the sheer audacity of the vermin trying to steal its meal. 3 more feet. My lungs felt like they were full of glass. Maya's head lolled, her hair sweeping through the fine black ash of the destroyed circle. The sight sent a fresh spike of adrenaline through me. I was dragging her through the remains of her own failed ritual. I reached the opening. The air that spilled out was cold. Not the supernatural chill of the entity, but a natural, damp cold. The smell of earth and decay. Of a place that had been sealed for a very long time. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I shuffled backward, pulling her through the jagged hole. Plaster dust rained down on us. A piece of drywall scraped my cheek. Then we were through. We were in. I was in the dark. It was a different kind of darkness. Not the living, consuming void that was the entity, but a simple absence of light. My eyes, blasted by the ritual's white flash and the single desk lamp, were useless. I could see nothing. The space was narrow. The wall behind me rough and uneven. The one in front of me was close. A corridor. A cramped, forgotten hallway tucked between the flimsy walls of the dorm. A hard, grating shriek ripped through the air from my room. It wasn't a sound of victory. It was a sound of pure, cosmic rage. The sound of a plan interrupted, of a god denied its tribute. The light from my room, the sliver of safety that spilled through the hole, was suddenly blotted out. The shadow thing was moving. It was coming. Panic, raw and absolute, seized me. I let go of Maya. She slumped to the floor with a soft thud. I couldn't carry her and run. I couldn't leave her. My mind was a loop of static. No, no, no. My hands flew out, slapping against the wall in front of me. I scrambled sideways, my fingers searching, desperate. The wall was old plaster, flaking under my touch. It was cold and slightly damp. I shuffled a few feet down the unseen corridor, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would break. The air here was thick, stale with the smell of a century of stillness. This was older. The dorm was a new skin built over old, rotting bones. The screaming in the walls wasn't a ghost haunting my room. It was a ghost haunting this entire forgotten space. And we had just broken in. Behind me, a sound that made my blood freeze. A slithering, flowing noise. It was the entity, pouring itself through the narrow opening in the wall. The darkness behind me began to deepen, a patch of absolute black that swallowed the faint outlines of the hole. It was hunting. My hand hit something. Wood. A frame. A door. Yes, my fingers clawed at the surface, searching for a knob. They found nothing but smooth, painted wood. A flat panel. Wrong. A sealed-up doorway. Useless. Shit. 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 I kept moving, half crouching, one hand on the wall, the other held out in front of me. I felt like a rat in a maze that was rapidly filling with poison. The crawling darkness was gaining. I could feel it, a drop in temperature, a pressure in the air that made my ears ache. It was silent now, no footsteps, just that horrible, relentless advance. My outstretched hand hit another doorframe. My fingers scrabbled, frantic. Cold metal. A knob. An old, round glass knob. Please. I grabbed it. I twisted. It was frozen solid, rusted shut. I threw my shoulder against the door, grunting with effort. Nothing. Solid as the wall it was set in. A new sound from the darkness behind me. A low chuckle. The same one from before. The sound of grinding stones. It was toying with me. It knew I was trapped. I backed away from the sealed door, my breath coming in ragged, painful sobs. I stumbled backward over Maya's legs. I nearly fell, catching myself on the opposite wall. It was closer. The cold was a physical thing now, biting at my exposed skin. I could almost see its form in the pitch black, a shape defined by a deeper, more profound emptiness. 2 embers ignited in the gloom, 10 feet away. It had found us. It was over. Then, from the floor, Maya groaned, a low, pained sound. The 2 burning eyes swiveled down toward the sound, distracted. It was all I needed. My survival instinct screamed one last, desperate command. I wasn't going to die cowering. I launched myself forward, away from the entity, past the sealed door, my hands sliding along the damp plaster. I ran 3 steps, 4, into pure, blind blackness. My fingers snagged on a 3rd door frame. Another knob. This one was different. Brass. Long and lever-shaped. I didn't hesitate. I didn't test it. I wrapped my hand around it, put my whole body into it, and pushed down. A loud, grinding click echoed in the narrow hall. It opened. The door swung inward into more darkness. I didn't care. I spun around, blind, reaching down for Maya. My hands found the fabric of her jacket. I pulled, hard. She was dead weight, but I was fueled by sheer, mindless terror. I dragged her across the dusty floor, over the threshold, and into the new room. I scrambled back, grabbed the edge of the door, and slammed it shut. The latch clicked into place a microsecond before something slammed against the other side. A massive, concussive boom that shook the entire frame. The old wood groaned. Dust rained from the top of the jamb. Then came the scratching. Long, deliberate scrapes. The sound of sharpened bone or metal being dragged slowly down the wood. It wasn't frantic. It was patient. The sound of something that knew it had all the time in the world. It was testing the door, taking its measure. I scrambled backward on my hands and knees, away from the door, my eyes wide in the gloom. I pushed myself up against a wall, trying to make myself small. My chest heaved. I held my breath, listening. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The sound was the only thing in the universe. Slowly, as my adrenaline began to recede, replaced by a deep, trembling exhaustion, my senses returned. I became aware of the room I was in. It was bigger than the hallway. The air was just as stale, but there was a different smell underneath the dust. A faint, metallic tang, and an antiseptic scent, like a hospital that had been closed for decades. A faint trickle of moonlight or city glow filtered in from a high, grimy window near the ceiling. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The darkness resolved into murky shapes. I was not in a dorm room. In the center of the room was a bed, not a wooden frame with a mattress, but a narrow, iron-framed thing with peeling white paint. Restraints, made of thick leather, were buckled to the sides. Institutional. My gaze swept the room. The walls were padded, but the material was rotted and cracking, revealing the stained plaster underneath. There was a single, heavy chair bolted to the floor in one corner. This wasn't a dorm. It wasn't even part of an old apartment building. This was a hospital room. Or an asylum. The scratching at the door stopped. The silence that followed was worse. I stayed frozen, my back pressed to the rotting wall, listening, waiting for the door to splinter and break, waiting for the end. Nothing. Maybe it had given up. Maybe it couldn't get through. A tiny, insane spark of hope ignited in my chest. I carefully let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My eyes adjusted more to the dim light. I could see the texture of the walls now. The cracked and peeling surfaces were busy, covered in something. My eyes focused on the wall next to me. There were marks. Scratches. Hundreds of them. Thousands. The padding had been torn away in places, and the plaster underneath was a chaotic web of carved lines. They weren't random. They were letters. Words. Scrawled over and over again. gouged into the wall with fingernails, with stones, with anything that could make a mark. A testament to years of madness and fear. Most of it was an unreadable jumble, overlapping sentences of terror. It sees me, hears me, help me, let me out. Where am I? But my eyes caught one phrase, repeated in a neater, more deliberate hand than the others. It was carved deeper, an island of clarity in a sea of insanity. It was written over and over, marching in a ragged column down the wall. I leaned closer, squinting in the faint light, my heart beginning to hammer a new, slow, dreadful rhythm against my ribs. I could make it out. 3 words. Not just one. Not just one. Not just one. The words were a brand on the wall, a madman's revelation. My mind refused to process them. It couldn't. It just showed them to me, over and over, like slides in a broken projector. Not just one. Not just one. Not just one. The scratching at the door was still going, a steady, rhythmic sound, like a prisoner counting the days. My breath was a hot, ragged thing in my throat. I couldn't tear my eyes from the wall. The phrase wasn't a warning. It was a statement of fact, a correction. We had misunderstood the problem. A groan came from the floor beside me. Maya stirred. Her head lifted, a silhouette against the faint light from the high window. What? Her voice was a cracked whisper. What happened? The thing. Is it gone? I didn't answer. I didn't look at her. All the fear I'd had of her crazy ritual, and the thing she'd brought through, it was gone. Burned away. All that was left was a hollow, cold anger. I pointed a trembling finger at the wall, at the words carved into the plaster. Read it, I said. My own voice sounded alien. Flat. Dead. She followed my finger, her eyes adjusting to the dark. I heard her sharp intake of breath, a small, choked sound. What did you do, Maya? I asked, finally turning to face her. What the hell did you let out? Her face was a pale oval in the gloom, streaked with dirt and ash. She started to shake, a tremor that ran through her whole body. I didn't summon it, I swear. Sobs started to rack her body, harsh and dry. I wasn't trying to summon it. Then what was all that? My voice rose, cutting through the sound of the scratching. The candles, the salt, the screaming in my head? What was that, if not a summoning? It was a beacon, she choked out, wrapping her arms around herself. Just a beacon. I was trying to talk to them. Them? The word hung in the air between us, heavy and cold. The scratching at the door seemed to get louder, more insistent. This place? The whole dorm. It's built on the old asylum's foundation, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. They never moved the bodies. Not all of them. They're still here. The poor ones. The ones nobody claimed. She looked at me, her eyes wild, with a fear that was older and deeper than my own. My brother, he went to school here. He died on campus 5 years ago. They said it was an accident, but he kept talking about this place, about the whispers in the walls. I had to know. I just wanted to ask them what happened to him. My blood ran cold, the screaming in the walls, the feeling of being watched. It wasn't one entity haunting a specific room. It was this entire ground, a mass grave we slept on every night. You said them, I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. You said ask them, she nodded, tears streaming down her face now. The ritual, it wasn't to call one thing, it was to open a line to all of them, a way to be heard. But I lost control. The one that came through first, the big one, it was too strong. It answered. She stared at the door, at the source of the relentless scraping. I didn't invite a demon, Leo. I just opened the door to the madhouse. The scratching stopped. The silence that fell was worse than any noise. It was a heavy, listening silence. My entire body went rigid, every muscle locked. I held my breath, straining my ears. The air was thick, heavy. The faint smell of sterile cleaners and old metal was stronger now. Maya had stopped crying. Her head was cocked, listening to the same absolute quiet. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Nothing. Maybe it was gone. Maybe it gave up. A foolish, desperate hope flickered. Then I heard it. It wasn't scratching. It was a footstep. A soft, shuffling sound on the old floorboards of the hall. Far down, near where we'd first broken through. Then another. And a third. But the third one sounded different. Heavier. A man's shoe, maybe. My eyes met Maya's in the darkness. Her face was a mask of pure terror. A floorboard creaked directly outside our door. Then another creak, from the other direction. They weren't coming from one place. A faint dragging sound started up in the room next to ours, on the other side of the padded wall. A slow, heavy scrape, like a piece of furniture being pulled across the floor. From the ceiling above us came a soft, rhythmic tapping. Tap. 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 It was the sound of a fingernail on wood. They weren't in the hall. They were everywhere, all around us. The walls were no longer a shelter. They were a cage. And the other inmates were awake. We were surrounded. "They're all out," Maya whispered, her voice trembling. "Oh God, they're all out!" I backed away from the door, pulling her with me. We scrambled to the far corner of the room, jamming ourselves against the rotted padding. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild drumbeat in the sudden symphony of horror. The sounds grew bolder. The shuffling in the hall was a chorus now, a dozen different gaits, some slow, some limping, some unnervingly fast. A low moaning started, a sound of pure misery that seemed to seep through the very plaster. I watched the door. I couldn't look away. I waited for it to splinter, for the wood to explode inward under a wave of phantom force. Instead, I saw the doorknob turn. It didn't rattle. It didn't shake. It turned slowly, deliberately, with a smooth metallic squeal. My mind screamed. This wasn't brute force. This was intelligence. This was purpose. The latch gave a loud click that echoed in the small room like a gunshot. The door swung inward, slowly, silently. The hallway was not empty. It was full, packed from wall to wall with shapes, figures standing shoulder to shoulder, a crowd of pitch-black silhouettes against a darker background. I couldn't see faces, only outlines. A tall, impossibly thin man hunched under the low ceiling. A stout figure that seemed to be on all fours. A small shape, no bigger than a child, stood right at the front, and dozens more packed in behind them, their forms merging into a solid wall of darkness. They didn't rush in, they didn't scream or roar, they just stood there. The only feature I could make out on any of them was their eyes. Pairs of them. Dozens of pairs. All burning with a faint internal light. Some were white. Some were yellow. Some a sick, feverish red. And they were all fixed on us. The pressure of that silent, collective stare was a physical force. It pushed the air from my lungs. I was paralyzed, pinned to the wall by 100 invisible needles. My instincts screamed at me to run, to fight, to do something, but my body wouldn't obey. I could only stand there, my mouth hanging open, a silent scream trapped in my chest. Maya was making a low, keening noise beside me, her hands covering her face. This was it. Decision time. The inmates had taken over the asylum. From the silent, watching crowd, one figure detached itself. It moved with a sense of purpose the others lacked. It wasn't a shambling monster or a twitching horror. It walked with a steady, measured gait. As it stepped over the threshold into our room, the faint moonlight caught its form. The shape was of a woman. She wore the clean, sharp lines of a nurse's uniform from another era. White dress, white cap, white stockings, all of it stained and yellowed with age. She walked past me as if I wasn't there. Her attention was not on me. Her burning yellow eyes were fixed on Maya cowering on the floor. The nurse stopped a few feet from her. Slowly, it raised a hand. In its grasp was a syringe. The glass barrel was cloudy, the plunger stiff. The needle was long, steel, and coated in a film of dark, dried rust. It didn't speak. It didn't threaten. It simply held out the syringe, pointing the needle directly at Maya. An offering. Or a sentence. The syringe pointed at Maya. Rust on the needle. Glass cloudy with God knows what. The nurse's eyes, two yellow coals in the pale mask of its face, did not blink. They were fixed on Maya, who was making a small, animal sound in the back of her throat. A sound of pure defeat. "It wants me," she breathed, the words scraped raw. "It's here for me, to finish what I started." Her body was a tight coil of terror beside me. The crowd of shapes in the hall stood silent, waiting. An audience for an execution. My feet moved. One scraped inch across the floor. It was not for her. Not for Maya. It was for me. A simple, cold piece of logic cut through the fear. A survival calculation. If they took her, my turn was next. The thought was sharp and clean. If I wanted to live, she had to live. I was not her friend. I was not her hero. I was just the next course on the menu. I took another step, placing myself half in front of her. My body was a shield I did not want to be. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. I stared at the nurse. At the impossibly clean lines of its uniform, stained with an ancient yellow. At the long, rusted needle. "Get back," I said. The words came out thin, weaker than I wanted. The nurse did not react. Its attention remained on Maya. But then, it did something that froze the blood in my veins. It tilted its head. A slow, slight, bird-like movement. An expression of curiosity. And then a thought landed in my skull. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't my own voice. It was a block of cold, alien knowledge inserted directly into my brain. A soul for a soul. The concept was simple. Brutal. It felt old. Older than the asylum. Older than the ground we stood on. It was a rule. I looked from the nurse to the silent crowd in the hall. My mind raced, trying to process, to understand. Another piece of knowledge slotted into place, just as cold and sharp as the first. The one who opened the door must close it. My breath caught. My eyes shot to Maya. She was still on the floor, shaking, but her eyes were wide now, looking at me. Did she hear it too? Did she understand? It wasn't a slaughter. It was a balancing of the books, an accounting. They didn't want to just kill. They wanted payment for being disturbed, for being let out of their cells, both physical and eternal. They didn't want both of us. They wanted her. The transaction was clear. Her soul, the one who knocked on their door, in exchange for mine. A trade. The crowd in the hall shifted. A single, unified movement, like dry leaves stirred by a single gust of wind. The sound of 100 soft, shuffling feet. The door, which had swung wide open, began to move. No hand touched it. No force was visible. It just swung inward, slowly, propelled by their collective will. The rectangle of dark hallway began to shrink. The air in the room grew thick. They were sealing us in. With a choice. My gaze was locked on Maya. Her face, pale and streaked with tears, was a mask of dawning comprehension. The same awful truth I had just learned was reflecting in her eyes. She knew the terms of the deal. My mind became a battlefield. One half screamed at me, "Do it! Push her forward. Give them what they want. It's her fault. She did this. She opened the door. Let her be the one to close it. You walk out. You live." The logic was undeniable. It was a clean equation of survival. Her life for mine. But my legs were lead. My arms were stone. My body refused to move. Could I do it? Could I physically grab her, this girl I barely knew, and shove her toward that rusty needle? Could I watch as they took her, knowing I had signed her death warrant to save myself? The thought made my stomach churn with a sour, hot bile. The door continued its slow, silent journey. closing with the finality of a tomb. The sounds from outside the door grew. The tapping from the ceiling was faster now, an impatient rhythm. The scraping from the next room was a loud, grating drag, as if a metal bed frame was being pulled across the concrete floor. The chorus of moans in the hall grew in volume, a symphony of ancient misery. The circle was tightening. The space to breathe was getting smaller. I looked at the nurse. It hadn't moved. It was a statue of patience, its syringe held out, an unwavering offer. It knew it didn't have to rush. It knew the choice was inevitable. Human nature was on its side. "Leo," Maya whispered. Her voice was just a flicker of sound. "Leo, I couldn't look at her. I stared at the door, now only a foot open. My chance to run was closing with it. My every instinct screamed. To fight. To flee. To shove her aside and make a break for it. The internal war raged. Live. 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 The word was a drumbeat in my head. Sacrifice her. Who would know? They would find her body. Maybe they wouldn't even find a body. You'd just be the lucky one who got away. You could make up any story you wanted. I felt a tremor run through my hand. I was clenching my fists so hard my knuckles were white. Sweat dripped into my eyes, stinging. I could do it. I had to. Then she moved. It happened so fast I almost didn't process it. A sudden shove against my chest. It wasn't strong, but it was enough to make me stumble back a step, breaking my locked stance. My eyes snapped to hers. The terror was still there, but underneath it was something else. A flicker of resolve, of acceptance. "I'm sorry, Leo," she said, her voice clear for the first time. The words were not a plea, they were a statement. "You live." Before I could react, before I could say a word or grab her arm, she turned. She pushed herself up from the floor, her movement stiff but deliberate. She squared her shoulders, and she started walking. She walked away from me, toward the nurse. My mind went blank. The internal battle, the frantic calculations, the fear, it all evaporated, replaced by a dull, ringing silence. I could only watch. I was a spectator now. My choice had been taken from me. She took one step, then another. Her back was straight. She didn't look back. The nurse remained still, a grim reaper in white, its weapon held ready. The crowd in the sliver of remaining doorway was silent. The entire world seemed to hold its breath. Time slowed down. Every detail became sharp, hyper-real. The way her dirty jeans scuffed against the floor. The slight tremble in her shoulders she couldn't hide. The nurse, raising the syringe just a fraction higher as she approached. The glint of faint light on the rusted metal of the needle. She stopped an arm's length away from the figure, close enough to touch. This was it, the payment, the closing of the door. Just before the needle touched her skin, she turned her head. Not all the way, just enough for her eyes to meet mine one last time across the small dark room. The look in them was not a fear anymore. It was an apology, a command. Her lips formed a word. No sound came out. I saw the shape of it, felt the intention of it. One single, silent syllable that hit me harder than any scream. Run! Then the shadows in the room surged. They didn't come from the hall. They came from the walls, from the floor, from the entity itself. A wave of absolute blackness. They didn't touch her, they didn't tear at her, they swallowed her. One moment Maya was there, a solid shape against the far wall. The next, a void. The space where she stood was empty. The nurse was gone. The syringe was gone. It was as if she had been erased from existence. A heavy click echoed through the room as the door swung fully shut, plunging us into near-total darkness. A moment of absolute silence fell. The tapping stopped. The scraping stopped. The moans died. And then, another sound. A soft, metallic squeak. I watched, frozen, as the doorknob began to turn again. Slowly, deliberately. It wasn't being forced, it was being opened. The door swung inward, revealing the hallway beyond. It was empty. The crowd of figures, the wall of bodies that had packed the space from floor to ceiling was gone. They hadn't left. They hadn't retreated. They had simply vanished. A perfect, clear path led from where I stood, through the open doorway and into the dark, silent hall. It was not a trap. It was not a threat. It was a release, an invitation. The price had been paid. The transaction was complete. I was free to go. My feet did not move. They were rooted to the floor. The empty hall stretched before me, a clean slate, a get-out-of-jail-free card written in the ink of Maya's soul. The silence was louder than the moans had been. It pressed in, a physical weight. The door was open. The path was clear. Run, her last command, a ghost on her lips. It finally broke the spell. I turned. I ran. My sneakers slapped against the worn linoleum of the asylum wing, the sound echoing, obscene in the sudden quiet. I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. Looking back meant seeing the space where she had been. Looking back meant acknowledging the price. My brain had shut that part off. It was a black box, locked and sealed. All that existed was the hallway in front of me. Darkness, long shadows cast from unseen sources. The air tasted of dust and decay, but it was air. I was breathing it. My lungs burned. My legs pumped. I ran past cell doors, dark mouths gaping on either side. I didn't look in. I didn't dare. My focus was a pinpoint, a single destination at the end of the long corridor. A rectangle of light. Faint. Gray. But it was light. It wasn't the sick yellow of the asylum bulbs. It was dawn. It was the outside world. Hope was a shot of adrenaline. It hit me harder than the fear. I pushed faster, my breath coming in ragged, tearing gasps. The light grew, resolving itself into a doorway, an exit, the end of the nightmare. I was almost there. 10 feet. 5. I burst through the doorway, expecting the familiar, dingy hallway of the dorm's first floor. I expected the vending machines and the RA's bulletin board. Instead, I met cold, wet air. I stumbled, my feet catching on a raised threshold, and pitched forward onto damp grass. My hands sank into soft, cold mud. I pushed myself up, coughing, spitting out the taste of dirt. Where was I? Wasan, I was outside, not in a hallway. The sky above was a bruised purple, the first hint of morning. Trees stood as black cutouts against the growing light. I was in a small, sunken courtyard behind the main dorm building, the place we were never supposed to go, the place with the old, forgotten maintenance accesses. I spun around. The exit I had just come through wasn't a normal door. It was a heavy iron door, low to the ground, set into a concrete foundation, a cellar entrance. Rusted. Ancient. It clicked shut behind me with a heavy, final sound. I backed away from it, my heart hammering against my ribs. A wave of nausea rolled through me. This was wrong. This wasn't the way out. But I was out. I was breathing real air. The cool morning breeze felt impossibly clean on my skin, washing away the stink of the asylum. I took a deep, shuddering breath. Then another. I was alive. I was outside. The solid brick wall of the dormitory rose up before me, a familiar landmark in a world that had just been torn apart. It was over. It had to be over. Then I heard it. A siren. It started as a distant wail and grew rapidly closer. Another joined it. Then another. A chaotic chorus of shrieks filling the morning air. Red and blue lights began to flash, strobing against the brick walls of the dorm, painting the courtyard in frantic, pulsing colors. The police. Ambulances. Someone had called them. Someone else had gotten out. Or maybe an RA had finally noticed something was wrong. A feeling of profound, bone-deep relief washed over me. I wasn't alone anymore. The real world was here. The nightmare was officially over. Screams erupted from the front of the building. Not the spectral moans from the hall, but real, human screams, the sounds of panic. I scrambled up the muddy incline of the courtyard, back onto the paved walkway that circled the dorm. I saw it then. Chaos. Students were running out of the main entrance, some in their pajamas, their faces masks of confusion and terror. Campus police were trying to set up a perimeter, shouting orders that no one was listening to. And then I saw the paramedics. A team in bright uniforms, rushing toward the entrance with a gurney. One of them saw me. A man, probably in his late 30s, with a calm, professional face. He broke away from the group and started jogging toward me. "Hey, you, are you okay?" he called out, his voice a beacon of sanity in the madness. I couldn't form words. I just nodded, a jerky, puppet-like movement. Relief made my knees weak. I leaned against the cold brick wall, the rough texture grounding me. He was getting closer. He was here to help. He would take me somewhere safe. They would ask questions, I would have no answers, but it didn't matter, I was out. "Did you come out of the building?" he asked, his pace slowing to a walk as he approached. His eyes were kind. Concerned. "Yes," I managed to croak, my throat raw. "We've got reports of... well, we're not sure what. A gas leak, maybe. People are hallucinating." He was about 10 feet away now. He gestured with his hand, a calming, take-it-easy motion. "Just stay right there, son. Let me check you out, make sure you're okay." I nodded again, my whole body starting to tremble with the aftershocks of terror. I was safe. I was finally, truly safe. As he raised his hand, the sleeve of his blue uniform shifted. On his wrist, just above where a watch would be, I saw it. A thin, red line, a scratch, angry and fresh. My blood turned to ice. It was identical, exactly the same scratch I had seen on Chris's hand in the bathroom mirror right before he tried to drown me. An impossible coincidence. A glitch in reality. My eyes snapped from the scratch to his face. He was still smiling, but it wasn't a kind smile anymore. It wasn't the smile of a paramedic. It didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were flat, empty, patient. My mind screeched to a halt. The sirens, the flashing lights, the screaming students. It wasn't a rescue. It was a harvest. He saw the recognition in my face. The smile widened. "There you are," he said, his voice dropping to a low, conversational tone. It was the deadliest sound I had ever heard. "We were wondering where you'd gone." He took another step. In his other hand, the one he had kept slightly behind his back, was a syringe, not old and rusted like the nurse's. This one was modern, clean. The liquid inside it was clear. I didn't think. I reacted. I pushed off the wall and scrambled backward, my feet slipping on the wet pavement. My breath hitched. All the air left my lungs. The terror came back, 1,000 times worse than before, because this time it was wearing the face of salvation. "Get away from me," I stammered, the words barely audible. "The test isn't over," he said, advancing slowly, a predator who knew its prey was cornered. "The price was paid for the asylum wing. A soul for a soul. A fair trade. But you're on a bigger stage now, Leo. The main event." My brain couldn't process the words. It was all noise. My gaze darted around frantically. The running students. The cops shouting. It was all fake. A set. A play designed to make us feel safe. To draw us out into the open. My back hit something hard. The wall of the dorm again. A dead end. The paramedic was only a few feet away now, the syringe held loosely in his hand. He wasn't rushing. He had all the time in the world. My eyes, wide with sheer, animal panic, lifted from his face and looked past him. I looked at the dorm, the building I had lived in for a year, the familiar brick, the neat rows of windows. And I saw them. In every single window, on every single floor, a figure was standing. Not students. Silhouettes, tall ones, short ones, twisted ones. The same silent crowd that had packed the hallway. They stood perfectly still, framed in the windows of my friends' rooms, in the common room, in the study lounge. An army of silent observers, watching the show. They hadn't been trapped in the asylum wing. The asylum wing had just been the door. They were in the walls. They were the whole goddamn building. The screaming students, the flashing lights, the sirens. It was all just noise. Scenery. A performance for my benefit. A way to lure the last rat out of the maze. The paramedic raised the syringe. The needle glinted in the flashing red and blue lights. "She opened a door," he said, his smile a perfect, chilling curve. "But you, Leo, you get to see what's on the other side of all of them." He lunged.